Hello everybody and welcome back to the action. This time it's the snooker semi-final, and what a semi-final we've got on our hands after the Chinese derby yesterday, which certainly entertained and provided some of the joy to the fans. This time it's the Scottish derby. It's John Higgins and the class of 92 against Stephen Maguire there, the Maverick, that will be trying to continue his mesmerising campaign at the International Championship. Remember, both of these players had to come through a decider in their opening qualifying round. Of course, Stephen Maguire had to do it against Krish Gurbaksani and John Higgins. That's a good start. John Higgins had to do that against Liam Pullen in best of 11 matches respectively out there. And who would have thought that both of these players will make it into the semi-final? But of course, only one of them can actually make it in towards the final stage. And a meeting with Wu Yize as John Higgins goes for a break off there. Well, of course, has to try and avoid the little mistakes that he's made previously in this campaign, but does seem to go for it quite nicely. And back to Maguire he goes. It changes the trajectory back to Higgins. Sends the red in towards the right cushion out there, and nice little shot there by Higgins. Although it does leave a little red there as availability for Maguire in towards the right corner. So has to be careful about this one. And goes down for it quickly. Of course, Maguire has basically built up his campaign on a very aggressive approach out there. So let's see if it's going to help him once again. Not this time around, because it's going to be a red that you'll actually miss here. And yeah, red is basically going to replace the green there on his spot. So therefore, it's a first real chance for John Higgins, as the green has gone on towards the ball cushion. But ultimately, it's now a red which is available to John Higgins to try and play, as he tries to, of course, get the cue ball down the table out there, for the majority of the reds still being as part of the main pack there underneath the pink. But it's certainly first point that goes to John Higgins' way, and now he has to try and exploit the opportunity that came his way and send the cue ball down the table out there. Maybe a little bit of power there, and try and get this cue ball in towards the red straight away, with him trying and hoping that he's actually going to land on something. But that hope doesn't seem to sort of transfer into anything other than hope. And I mean, it's a decent shot out there that Higgins has played. He managed to get a lot of power on the cue ball, but it does look like it is going to be all for nothing out there, and he'll have to play a safety shot this time around. Although he has spread the reds quite nicely out there, so whoever gets the next chance will be looking to try and exploit it to sort of more points than the 5 that John Higgins has managed to score this time around. So I was looking to try and find the cue ball in behind the yellow and play the shot really nicely out there. Only leaving 2 shots there potentially to Stephen Maguire, one on the left and the one on the right hand side of the table. So I think the one on the right is going to be taken as a cross double there by Maguire. So has to try and exploit these early opportunities now, Stephen. Of course, he has already missed a long red, so has to make sure his safety play is going to be pretty much second to none out there. And yeah, I do actually think that this match could go either way, but I'm actually going to go for it to go quite even, just because of the similarity in their campaigns. You know, John Higgins defeating the likes of, as I say, Liam Pullen, Oliver Lyons, and of course Scott Donaldson and Jose Vafai previously, before getting himself past John Murphy in the quarter-final stage. And talk about Stephen Maguire, he's managed to do the same, as I say, in the opening round against Krish Gurbaksani in the qualifiers. Managed to have a very well-grinded win against Shu Si out there in the first round. Managed to defeat Karen Wilson out there as well. So has had some of those names knocked out. And also, if you remember, he's knocked down Zach Zivity to get himself into the semi-final. a player that, of course, has managed to sort of dominate Neil Robertson for the majority of their last 16 match. So now Maguire trying to find an opening himself, but this time around just pushing his red towards the right corner, and I think he had to play that shot more thing on the edge there, and I mean, the same red is going to be available to Higgins to an extent out there, but I still think that it's going to be blocked out by another red. Therefore, he has to try and sort of mind his time out here and sort of try and exploit another safety battle that he's going to find himself a part of. Push the red in towards the black out there, but has to make sure that he pushes the black on towards the corner pocket, not the red. Which, I mean, he hasn't really managed to do, to be fair. But, as I say, with all these reds being in the way of each other, doesn't look like that's going to do a lot of damage to him either. The opening stages of the frame number 1. And, of course, if you go back in the history of these two playing the International Championship, you know, they always got off to a great start themselves out there, winning the majority of the opening frames. And, of course, ultimately the quarter-final match of sort of Maguire, he's lost out the opening frame but managed to win 6 on the bounce out there. So Higgins has to be mindful of just giving Maguire all the momentum out there, because he is going to be the first player to try and chase making their ranking event win there in 4 decades. So when he was in his sort of late teens out there, of course, 20s, 30s, 40s, and now with him being 50 years of age, can he make it the first player that actually makes it a ranking event title in all of those decades? And I mean, for Maguire, it will be a nice little addition there to the Championship League that he managed to win earlier this season. And as he said, and I think he was very, very much humble to himself, he said he just managed to find himself on the receiving end of things and managed to win 50-50 matches against his opponents. As he said, someone has to win it, and managed to do it 4 times on the bounce. See if he's going to be able to win it 5 times on the bounce. So set up a very exciting clash there with Wuiza, but now left the red there, Higgins, for Maguire to try and exploit him towards the right corner. He's already missed one of them. Always unlikely to miss 2 of them in a row, but with the way he's played the shot, he had to accelerate some of the power on the cue ball, and therefore he tried to force his way through the shot, and in the end, I mean, he's managed to get himself perfectly on the brown, didn't quite manage to get the red in. Let's see if Higgins is going to have anything available towards the left corner there for himself. Of course, it's the first best of first to 9 match for either one of these two players this season. John Higgins' best result was a quarter final, but ultimately lost out to Guy Wilson out there at Wuhan Open, and another semi-final, of course, where he managed to lose out to Anthony McGill at the British Open earlier this season. That has indeed finished up as a runner-up there to Sean Murphy, but it's a wonderful red out there for Higgins to play in towards the left corner. Certainly played that with some conviction and power. Got the cue ball as close to the blue line as he could have been, but in the end still going to be on the wrong side of it. So ultimately, I mean, if the pink is actually potable, you would have to advise Higgins to go for that pot. Even though it is going to be difficult, you have to feel like there's pretty much not going to be any value in potting the blue, otherwise, other than 5 points. And therefore, the logical outcome does seem like the fact that for Higgins try and go for the pink and try and accelerate himself off into the distance, with him getting himself lined up for the red in towards the left corner out there. So played through the blue in the end. So clearly, things like he's got something available out there into the right corner, which I certainly didn't see, because, you know, he's not going to have anything in the right corner, which I can tell you that for free. He's having a look to see maybe he's going to be able to get through to this red in towards the right corner. But, I mean, it's a rare shot, it's a difficult shot, and also, I mean, if he was playing for it anyway, I'm just a bit surprised that he got so close to touching another red out there. I mean, the plant is there in towards the right corner as well, but there's so much distance in between those 2 reds that you probably wouldn't even consider taking that red on. Now, having a look to see if he's going to be having a black available to play in towards the right corner. So clearly he's still deciding to go for that red and taking the attacking approach. So he goes for an extension on the cue there as well. Makes it a bit more difficult. And already quite a nasty pot out there. And I mean, maybe he's going to be able to get through for this red there in towards the right corner, which I said was a plan. I didn't actually think that he could see enough of that, and he couldn't. I mean, it was marginal, and you could see that one coming. He misses a red there, he catches another one, and ultimately it's a great chance given away to Maguire now. Surprised to see Higgins going for that approach. As I say, if he wasn't certain, probably should not have gone for it, so probably is a sign that he was certain, just didn't manage to execute it in the perfect way that was required for it. Now, Maguire steps up to the table and will try and produce some sort of performance of his own out there. Push the cue ball through this shot on the red in towards the left corner. Try and accelerate the white off into the top part of the table. And yeah, when I say accelerate the cue ball onto the top part of the table, it makes it difficult there for him to play. Had to play with a lot of power and ultimately missed the red in towards the left corner out there. So I think he just caught too much of the back end jaw there, and because he played with power, there was no real chance for red just to drop out there. So first chance comes and goes there for Maguire, but ultimately it's a brilliant second chance now to John Higgins. You could argue it's the third one, but ultimately, going for the red was risky one for him at the previous occasion. Lost out a position, no sense to Maguire. Managed to re-establish it now, and now leads by 19 points to 0, having all the reds available there to him, at least sort of 5 reds on the lower part of the table, and probably 2 more on the top part of it. But all of them, of course, are still located underneath the blue out there. So I think he'll just try and make his way through those reds one by one, starting with the lower part of the table and sort of in between the ones that are located underneath the pink but above the black out there, and try and move on towards the 2 reds that I mentioned that are going to be closer to the right middle and the blue line out there. But it was a massive chance there for Maguire, and if he wants to make it into the final, he has to be sure that he takes those chances, especially against someone like John Higgins. That gets himself lined up for the black in towards the right corner once again out there. Plays the shot with a deep screw back, and had to get the cue ball down for the top part of the table, of course. Can mix it up out there, and doesn't really have to use all of these reds in a clear pattern. Can always try and go for a little setup there for himself, and just mix it up from the left corner towards the right middle. But seems to stay on the left corner for now, so maybe he'll just use an extension and try and reach for that red with a little rest shot. Maybe he's going to go for a little bridge over for the red in towards the left middle. Whatever it's going to be. Going to find out very soon. And still, the position is only going to get better for him, because you're not going to have Higgins cannoning into the reds there with the cue ball for no reason. Probably one of the last players on the tour to actually do that. So in the end, he will go for a little shot of just stretching a bit too much into the left corner, but ultimately was able to deal with it. And today, Stephen Maguire will broke a record, undefeated John Higgins. Well, I mean, I think the head-to-head is 14-13 in his favour, so I'm not too sure what record he's talking about. But I mean, he certainly can break the head-to-head record and get himself off into the final. I think that's going to be the main focus. But ultimately, he's not off to a great start right now, 43 points down. And Higgins still doesn't seem like he's going to run out of reds anytime soon. Play for this one in towards the right middle and get a little stun shot on the cue ball. Wants to play for the top part of the blue. Send the cue ball down the table once again out there for having at least 4 more reds available there to his name, as he just keeps adding those to the list. And, let's say has taken the red out of the middle pocket out there. So that's not going to be available there for him. And I think the majority of the next couple of shots are going to be played in and around the pink out there, which is going to make the life a lot easier there for Higgins to try and get himself onto the last 3 or 4 reds out there. So he plays another one, and of course getting ever closer to that frame ball finish line there in the first frame. After it took some time for us to get through the safety battle, but ultimately it only took, it would seem there, the second chance to Higgins to actually get himself on the board with the score sheet. As he plays the pink nicely. Cannons, of course, the red out of the way, which is going to be a minor problem, but ultimately, as I say, don't think he's going to be locking reds now, because the 2 reds that is going to disappear underneath the pink, off into the left and potentially right corner out there, I think are actually going to get him over the line, especially in the fact that he plays 2 expensive colours with those 2, because right now he's going to have 75 points on the table out there, so 64 when this black disappears. So the next red plus expensive colour combination will certainly leave Maguire needing snookers in the opening frame. 64 and counting here for Higgins, and of course the first break of 50 plus there achieved in the opening frame. Of course, in the quarter-final there was a century made against Stephen Maguire out there, and of course there was a century made by John Higgins himself, defeating Scott Donaldson by sort of 110 points, I think it was at that time. Now, frame ball for Higgins to get himself off to a perfect start and try and accelerate off into the distance. And ultimately, of course, there's one thing about dominating the play, but there's another very important point there that has to be made for Higgins' point of view. As long as he doesn't let Maguire run away with it, he has to try and make sure he doesn't let Maguire have his own momentum and therefore try and dominate the play against Higgins, force him on the front foot. And of course, when Maguire plays like he's on it, he could be one of the most sort of unpredictable and dangerous players on the tour. But right now, it is certainly the predicted outcome of the opening frame, and it's a break of 67 points, which is going to require the double for Higgins to resume the pursuit, as he plays the red in towards the left middle. Right now, he's still on for a century break potentially, but that's going to come to an end as he misses red in towards the left middle and out there. And therefore, it's a break of 67 points that ultimately will get John Higgins the opening frame, as he now leads Stephen Maguire by 1 frame to 0. And as I say, you know, he's approaching that sort of level parity with this head-to-head there, 14 to 13. A couple of late head-to-head meetings have still actually been quite level there with them, with Higgins winning 3 of those and Maguire winning 2 of the last 5 of them. Therefore, it's just a bit of a different sort of heavyweight zone there for him, because Maguire will be looking to try and get himself into the final, and of course Higgins will have his eyes on potential the title prize, because realistically, if he comes into the clash of Wu Yize, I mean, barring the fact that Wu has played absolutely exceptional snooker, he would still fancy Higgins to be the minor favourite there, and will come into that match as the underdog. But ultimately, anything can happen in the final, and as we've seen, by the way, we're going to have another brand new pairings of players into the final, whatever it's going to be, if it's going to be Higgins or Maguire there. Of course, Wu Yize hasn't participated in the final this season anyway, so the stat will remain that only Shaun Murphy managed to make it into 2 of the ranking event finals, even if you count Shanghai Masters in your mind. It's still going to be only Shaun Murphy that's managed to take it into the final twice out there, with it being Xi'an Grand Prix, where it ultimately lost out to Mark Williams by 10 frames to 3, and the clash against Anthony McGill at the British Open, where Shaun Murphy managed to take it with that scoreline of 10 frames to 7 out there. The referee just having a look to see that the pink is going to be respotted perfectly, and of course the interesting thing is, when Maguire is going to be behind out there, he has to try and go for it. Therefore, makes the match a lot more enjoyable to watch from a neutral's point of view, and could also actually do it from more enjoyable for Higgins' point of view, and he tries to exploit all the vulnerabilities that Maguire has got, and try and put himself facing even bigger of a deficit than just a single frame to 0. Higgins, the old fox, is too good for Maguire. Well, Jimmy, good point, but I wouldn't really say that Maguire is sort of 25, 23-year-old. Certainly still has a lot of experience, not on this arena, but playing snooker in general. And I still think, as I say, from Maguire you can expect absolutely anything. And therefore, there's always a chance out there. Remember, don't really be sort of fooled by the fact that, you know, Higgins wins the opening frame and he's going to dominate this game. He's managed to do it twice there against another man from Scotland, Scott Donaldson out there. But, you know, ultimately lost out 4 frames on the bounce in the same match. And was actually going 4-2 down going into frame number 7. So Maguire can still do it. But the problem is, because it's the semi-final stage, he has to try and make sure, if he's going to do it, he has to try and start it very, very soon right now. Goes for the red in towards the right corner, misses that one, but ultimately not going to leave anything away there to Higgins. So, I mean, I say nothing. Maybe he's going to try and take a double in towards the left middle and try and leave the cue ball for the black. And of course, he had a nice little introduction of doubles in the previous frame, and what a shot he just played. Brilliant stuff there by Higgins. Once again, Maguire played the right shot out there, but of course couldn't predict the fact that Higgins was going to go for a double. And what a double it was. Brilliant. Only just about catches the front jaw, but still drops in comfortably with the red. And now, I mean, the next issue, of course, is going to be the fact that Higgins probably has to get himself lined up for the shot in towards the left middle, which is going to be an issue in terms of getting the red in, but also trying to get the cue ball onto the top side of the blue to try and accelerate the whites off into the main bunch. Don't think he's going to be able to do it with the black here. So has to play with power, and in the end, he's played the shot nicely. I wouldn't really say he's played the shot to the perfect extent, because don't think he's going to be able to get into the bunch. Therefore, it leaves the only option of trying to play, play for one more red that Maguire has left out on the cushion previously. And I mean, Higgins still went for it, of trying to go for the bunch, and in the end, I mean, it looks like it's actually a really nice outcome there for him. Because the same red that I mentioned, he actually managed to get it on the end out there with the cue ball being bounced off in towards the right corner pocket. And managed to catch that red off the cushion. And now he's going to be playing that one, you would think, in towards the left middle out there. So, yeah, it's a nice little chance there for Higgins. And as I say, it comes off absolutely nothing out there for him. But these are the chances that, you know, whatever you think about Maguire, you're going to frustrate him. And therefore, you know, just force him to go for those 50-50 shots that realistically you don't really want to attempt in a semi-final against John Higgins. But right now it's a perfect start for the world champion and the Wizard of Wishaw. As right now he tries to get the black in towards the left corner out there. Play the shot really nicely. So 22 points now is the advantage. All of those, of course, being scored on the same break here. Trying to add to that counter of 67 points scored on the previous occasion in frame number 1 out there. And I mean, if he manages to take all of those reds that are actually in open play for him right now, it's going to be more than halfway there, because he already is going to have 30 points off these black and 4 more reds being available to him. I think predominantly the ones in towards the left corner out there, maybe one more in towards the right corner, but that's going to be sort of later off to come. Right now, just trying to focus himself on the red in towards the left part of the table. Try and get the cue ball to stop in time to get himself lined up with a straight line on the black with a minor angle to try and send the cue ball on towards the top part of the table to try and choose which red he's actually going to attempt to go for. Now, the red that I counted of as available in towards the left corner is being exploited right now by Higgins. Because if he gets himself lined up perfectly on that red, potentially he can still try and make the cut quite simple, yet very effective in terms of trying to spread the remaining reds out. And at that time, of course, you would hope that he'll have a nice little points cushion to his name as well. Because right now it's 38 points of an advantage, with 107 still being available on the table. And remember, Maguire's yet to score his first point. He's gone for a couple of reds, and of course could have had the first point in the entire match out there. Ultimately, missed the red in towards the right corner, and that was the thing that actually gave a chance to Higgins in the opening frame to get himself a break of 67 points, and therefore close out the opening frame without real chance there for Maguire, apart from those 2 long shots. And similar story here so far, one long shot, and a brilliant double there from John's point of view. And now tries to accelerate the cue ball off into the reds, and ultimately, is he going to be on anything? I mean, it was a decent effort. Still actually think that he could have gone for that extra red into the left corner, but he obviously felt like there was a perfect angle on the black to try and accelerate the cue ball off into those reds. And in the end, the only real chance of continuing the break is going to be the shot in towards the green pocket. But with the cue ball being so close off into the red, you just have to question how much of a sensible shot selection that is actually going to be there. I mean, Higgins could try and put this red on towards the cushion or he can try and attempt it in towards the corner. And in the end, it does look like even the pockets have been getting the reputation of quite forgiving out there. The red is going to stay out, so the break of 46 points. And it does look like Maguire will get his first real chance of raiding towards the green pocket out there. And of course, it's a perfect chance there for him, from the neutral's point of view, to get himself a frame on the board with 99 points on the table. Going to try and reduce that amount to 91 here, but has to play the shot in the way that he's going to get the cue ball off into the brown, but I don't think he played the shot well at all. If he goes for the brown right now, he has to bridge over a green, therefore makes the shot very complicated there for him, so has to go for a plan B option, which is going to be just rolling the cue ball in behind the brown, but ultimately still could do some damage to John Higgins with no reds being available on towards the cushion out there. Therefore, has to try and bounce the cue ball with some of this power to get into the main bunch of reds. And yeah, well, has to judge this one well to make sure that he doesn't leave any of those chances away to Maguire. Of course, the first one wasn't taken, and actually didn't expect Maguire to underrun there with the pace for the brown. You could feel like there was a chance there for him to try and exploit the gap there in between the brown and green, try and get the cue ball down for the blue, but obviously wasn't the case there with Stephen. And now, let's see what John Higgins can actually try and provide us with. And it's going to be the first attempt, which is not going to be taken well. So, attempt number 2 coming up, as Maguire gets himself 4 foul points, which at this stage of the frame is not going to do him anything. And ultimately, just having a look to see if he's going to be able to get through to this red off into the left corner. And I mean, having a good look at this one, and it actually feels like he can go for it. So, of course, we've seen Higgins miss this chance earlier where he thought the red was available, but in the end, he couldn't manage to execute that one perfectly. But Maguire can. What a brilliant shot and a brilliant find that is, of course. A bit sloppy that from Higgins' point of view, because he should have been nowhere near leaving that red on, potentially on for Maguire. And in the end, it is the Maverick that is getting the first real opportunity now to get on the break. He gets a pink in towards the right middle right now. So refusing to go for the black in towards the right corner. And just playing for the pink. As I said previously, not going to have any of those issues with the red so far. So just trying to get himself a frame on the board, which at this stage will be mighty important there for him. Instead of going 2-0 down, basically force it into a first to 8 match. As right now he's got all the options and he's got all the chances now on the table for him. The only slight issue that he might have to be staying is going to be that little cluster of 3 reds right underneath the pink spot. But I still think that you can exploit and make your way out of it. And therefore get yourself lined up on a couple of more of those reds in towards the right corner. Try and accelerate yourself off into the distance and certainly get this frame 1 in the current visit to the table. So Maguire can try and play through this red now. He's got a nice little angle to try and maybe do a little bit of damage to that clearance. To the cluster, I should say. But in the end, I mean, the way he's approaching these shots is like he doesn't care about the cluster, which probably is an indicator that, you know, the lower of the reds will actually go into the left corner, which of course will free up another red into the right corner. And therefore, if you eliminate the first 2, you have the third one available. And that exactly looks to be the case now with him playing for this red in towards the left corner, and he certainly was available. So now with the angle he's got on the cue ball, he's going to be able to force the other red out of the way and get himself off into a nice little black here, off into the right corner. So being 17 points down, ultimately ain't going to matter there for him as the fact, as he still has got a potential break of something like 90 points available there for him if he plays all of these 4 remaining reds with the black and manages to produce a total clearance on the table. You can of course still shadow and outshadow, I should say, the break of 67 points achieved by John Higgins in the opening frame. Of course, John managed to do that under different sort of circumstances, working at the starting point of a position. Not so much here for Maguire, but in the end I don't think he's going to care one bit about it. And I will say this though, the shot that he just played is going to get him in all sorts of trouble, because out of the perfect position, he just run himself completely out of the game. unless he goes for green or yellow. I mean, what on earth was he thinking about there? You could see absolutely no signs of danger. And yet he was trying to send the cue ball in towards the pink out there, and ultimately had that one blocked out by another red in towards the left middle out there. I mean, yeah, he has to go for taking the green on towards the cushion, but ultimately I just think it's going to be more of an issue there for himself. As Higgins is 9 points clear, so he doesn't really need the green to actually get himself over the line in this frame, you would think, because if he manages to pot these 3 reds with expensive colours, he's going to be sort of 35 points away from Maguire. So as I say, a couple of strange shot selections, and I mean, if anything, that green actually allows Higgins to go for a bit of a risky shot approach on those 3 reds and try and maybe pot one of them. And that's exactly what he's tried to do now. He's missed it though, and is he going to leave a red away? He will. It's not going to be an easy one though. Maguire gets away with that mistake, and going to get himself another chance now. Of course, it's still a long shot, which he has missed out on 3 of the previous 3 occasions. Now has to make it 1 out of 4 there for him, and it doesn't. So it's going to be 0 out of 4. And where's the red going to finish? It's going to finish in a nice little chance there for Higgins to try and send that one in towards the yellow pocket. And the minor issue is going to be the fact that he's going to have the cue ball inevitably to cannon the brown, with the red going so close to the main ball colour out there. And yeah, has to navigate his way to make sure that he doesn't take the pot for nothing out there, and still gets himself on towards the sort of a colour of any chance or sort. And yeah, might actually consider going for a safety shot instead. And that's exactly what he's done, just pushing the red on towards the left cushion. And ultimately, I mean, he's left another chance there for Maguire to take the red in towards the left middle, even though the red is very close on towards sort of being that very straight shot, with the cue ball being exactly on the black ball cushion. Maguire's gone for it, and he's just about going to miss it. But ultimately, I mean, he's played the shot in the right way, in the fact that he's caught the front jaw first, and therefore I just think even if it makes this red possible there for Higgins, it's going to be a mighty effort there for him, and still going to be far from ideal in terms of getting on the next colour. So Maguire playing that shot pretty well out there, and Higgins is going to try and exploit the thing that's been working so well there for him, and it's going to be another double out there for John Higgins, and what a double it has been. Brilliant stuff out there. He's missed that one in the first frame, but of course he's managed to take 2 of those already in frame number 2. And right now, it is going to be green to take on in towards the right pocket. Maybe he can go for the blue in towards the right middle and try and get the green into play. Of course, has got a free shot basically of having red so close in towards left middle. And in the end, if there was an attempt of trying to get the green out of play, it wasn't a very successful one. But as I say, in the end, I mean, as long as he goes for expensive colours on those 2 reds, he's not really going to need the green there to himself. With himself already having a 15 points of a gap, and now he's trying to exploit and make sure he's going to have enough points here. So if he goes for 2 reds and 2 browns, he's going to have 25 points with still yellow to play. So in the end, that's the blueprint. Ideally, of course, you want 2 sneakers on the green for Maguire to make sure that he's probably not going to come back to the table out there. But of course, priority number 1 has to be the fact that, you know, he takes at least Snooker away to Maguire. And ultimately, I mean, he goes for the yellow right now, which probably is still understandable. He's going to have enough points even if he goes for the yellow and then stakes the blue with the wrong side of it, gets himself lined up for the yellow, and then tries to do something with the green, which is currently positioned very close on towards the right-hand cushion. So ultimately, in the end, it does look like it was the right shot there for Maguire to actually play, putting the green on towards the right-hand cushion. But as I said previously, still, I knew that it wasn't going to be enough there to stop Higgins from getting himself a frame ball over the line. Therefore, it doesn't seem to be the case right now. He's now 19 points clear, so logically, the blue put him 24 points clear, making that 26 with the yellow. Therefore, just getting himself over the line by a single point. But ultimately, of course, it's going to be a very difficult point there for Maguire to try and achieve on just 5 colours remaining on the table. And maybe, you never know, Higgins is still going to play for a little double attempt on the green. And towards the left middle pocket out there for him. But for now, goes for an extension on the cue to make sure he's going to reach this yellow. Try and roll this one in towards its own pocket. And minus screw back on the cue ball. And just maybe a little stunt shot out there. It's going to mean that it's going to be 26 points. Way off into the distance now with 25 on the table for Stephen Maguire. And as I say, just send the cue ball off into the bulk area and try and get this green in towards the lower part of the table. Probably is going to be the perfect way for him to try and finish this second frame. Couldn't quite manage it, and of course with it being a single snooker, Maguire has to come back to the table to try and find his chance out there. And well, I mean, of course you can try and argue whether it is better for him to try and actually pot the green and sort of put all of his eggs in one basket and try and do the snooker attempt on the brown. Of course, it's going to mean less of a chance there in terms of having fewer colours to put the cue ball in behind of. Ultimately, it's going to give you more control of that cue ball being placed very close to the brown, which you can do to yourself when you try and pot the previous colour. Right now, of course, Higgins doesn't have to worry about any of those things, and he just try and well, realistically, he has to try and hit the green, with it being the minor objective for him, and the objective maximum is going to have to try and get the green towards the pocket out there, whether it is going to be to actually pot it or force Maguire to potting that colour himself. And it does look like Maguire has gone for the wrong shot approach, and it's going to be green given away here to Higgins. As Maguire leaves this one very close in towards the left corner. Higgins is going to be down for the shot very quickly, and as I say, if you get the green in, it's certainly going to be a 2-0 lead there for Higgins to try and exploit and hold on to going into frame number 3, but didn't manage to do it. I mean, it looks simple enough out there, but of course, you know, maybe he was just trying to get the cue ball into a safe manner first. And Maguire comes back to the table once again, tries to send the green in towards the lower part of it. And it's a nice little line there with the cue ball. Is he going to be in behind the black? Yes, he will. Brilliant effort there. You know, green is not entirely on the cushion, so, you know, the miss from Higgins could still be very costly there for him. And remember, at some stage of this frame, Maguire was very much the favourite for making that clearance and actually making it a 1 frame each out there. Let's see if Higgins is going to be able to hit the green first time around. And if he does, where is he going to actually put the green? And, I mean, it's going to be quite close to the cue ball though, even though Higgins has managed to accomplish the main objective there for him, of course, getting the cue ball to hit the green. Right now, it's going to be quite close to the brown, so clearly Maguire has to try and send it down the spine there with the green, try and get the cue ball in behind the brown. Decent effort once again out there. And, I mean, it will do him nicely, to be fair, because of the way he's played this shot. If he manages to get the blue in the way, because the green sort of landed exactly on top of the black. And therefore, I mean, Higgins doesn't seem to be too concerned about it, so probably just trying to hit a little swerve around this shot. And, well, I mean, brilliant pot there by Higgins. Certainly wasn't planned, but, I mean, yeah, he cannoned the green perfectly off the black there in towards the left corner, which of course is going to mean confirmation there of Maguire losing the second frame, with him now having to find 3 snookers. So, sorry, 2 snookers on 4 remaining colours, but as I say, I don't think it's going to matter massively because John Higgins is going to put brown there to himself as well. In the break of 7 points, certainly, is now going to get him over the line, and we're halfway through the first mini session, and so far, it has been a bit of a struggle there for Maguire as Higgins goes for a beautiful blue out there, in towards the yellow pocket, and now gets himself lined up for another long shot here, potentially, of the pink in towards the right corner. So providing all the entertainment to the fans that you could dream about. Not quite on the pink though. And as long as he's not going to drop in towards the left middle as a fluke, which he ain't going to do, it is going to be another frame there to Higgins in a similar fashion there to the opening one. I think he was a bit more controlled in the maiden frame there. But in the end, it's Maguire that is unable to produce that clearance. And, you know, the 32 points of his highest break of the second frame certainly could have been a lot higher than that. Running himself out of position on the colour. had to play a safety shot, and in the end lost out on the safety battle number 2, with Higgins finding 2 of the doubles out there to get himself significant points breaks in those 2 opening frames, and now leads Maguire by 2 frames to nil. Nice and early start there from Higgins' point of view, and now Maguire has to try and dig really deep out there if he wants to try and come back into this encounter there with Maguire. Of course, he'll have a couple of more chances to try and do it later on out there. But last thing that he wants is to give Higgins all sorts of points advantage out there. And yeah, he wants to get this match as far away as possible there, of course, right now, with him having already a 2-0 of a deficit in terms of frames. And right now Higgins goes for a little bathroom break. So now when the referee tries to re-establish all of these threads and colours, Maguire has to make sure that he's going to be the player that gets himself in with the first chance when the third frame will start, but also has to make sure that he finally takes at least some of those long pots out there for himself and tries to exploit the chances that are going to be there for him, of course. So right now, just having a look to see if it's going to be available there for him to try and go for an early red out there as Higgins returns to the table, and we pretty much have everything ready out there for us to get the third frame underway now with Higgins against Maguire. By the way, Higgins is still dominating the ball out there, so 77% have gone actually for John Higgins to win the first session, 18% for Maguire, and only 5% for the draw out there. Surprised by that, as I say, but ultimately Xiaozington against Boyizet yesterday was ranked at 4% for a draw in the first session, and of course that was the case after a magnificent clearance there from Xiaozington in the last frame. Saw him turn down a 4-2 of a deficit there to himself and turning it into a 4-0 draw going into session number 2. As the referee there just tries to make sure that it's going to be everything fine there in the crowd. Higgins and Maguire both looking at that. And ultimately, it does seem to be back to normal. And it is going to be the third frame started there. Of course, Maguire is going to be the player to break off here. And needs a good break off to get himself started in a perfect manner out there. Try and accelerate off into the distance against John Higgins, at least in one of those frames. Now, needs to make sure he doesn't leave an opening red there, which has been the tendency so far with those 2 available there for Higgins. And in the end, it's a decent line with the cue ball, but it doesn't quite reach the bulk line out there, so the bulk cushion I should say, sorry, and in the end he's going to have that red available there to Higgins, and similar to the shot that Maguire's played himself in the sort of second frame, I think it was, with his opening shot, where he's gone for it and realised that he wasn't going to leave anything away there to Higgins, which you would have thought at that stage. In the end, it was a brilliant double that John Higgins was able to find that got himself a substantial points lead there into frame number 2, and therefore gave a nice little foundation to win that frame, with 2 visits to the table required once again out there. So not quite perfect game from Higgins' point of view, but this is much better there for him because it's a brilliant red to go off into the right corner. And right now, as he asks the referee to clean the white here, clearly not too happy with the cue action there. The cue ball has absorbed out there, but it's a brilliant long shot for him. As I say, Maguire couldn't really have done much more about it on the break-off. And let's see if Higgins is going to be able to cannon the cue ball off into the reds out there and try and get himself lined up for the shot in towards the right corner, with I think is going to be the prime objective there for him. And of course, as he pots the black now in towards the left corner, try and accelerate the cue ball with a lot of the power, but still controlled. I mean, is he going to drop the red in at the same time? He is. I mean, he clearly tried to cannon that red towards the left middle and get himself set up with the right corner, which I mentioned previously, but in the end, he's going to drop the red with the black, and it's going to be a foul there, and the end of break there from John Higgins. Maguire will step up to the table and get himself lined up for this red in towards the right corner. So try and accelerate the cue ball off into the black now, with it being pretty much, I think, the only red that Higgins has left out there for Maguire and for himself. Now, the shot of the black is going to be the one that dictates if it's going to be a safety battle or Maguire is going to be able to continue this break. And it does look like going to have a minor chance out there of taking the red in towards either left or right middle. But once again, it's not one of those shots that you can actually put your money on and say that he's going to be a real easy start off there for him to continue the break. I mean, he's having a look to see if there's going to be a shot in towards the green pocket, which may actually be the easier shot there for him to try and take. But in the end, as I say, I think the red in towards the right middle was always going to be more appealing there to him. The only problem with that red is if he misses that one, of course, he's going to have another red there given away to Higgins, but not this time around. So Maguire certainly putting all of his concentration on that shot and now trying to get himself accelerated away off into the distance. Going to be 16 points of a break there after this blank, which is going to be 50% of his highest break in the match so far. And as I say, absolutely must win this frame because he can't afford to be going 4-0 down off into the second mini session out there. He can't really afford to go 3-1 down against John Higgins. He has to try and make sure that he wins those two of the next frames. And I mean, he's tried to basically do all the hard work right here, right now. And has he managed to overplay that shot? Is he going to be lined up for the red in towards the right middle? I mean, it does seem that way. And, you know, gets away with that one slightly because he didn't really have to play that shot just yet. And obviously tried to make sure that he's going to have all of those reds available there to himself. And in the end, managed to get away with it. So that's probably the only thing that matters. Now, the break of 17 points gets himself lined up for the ball colours, which was a natural transition there from that red being played in towards the right middle. Now, having a look to see if he's going to have a couple of those reds off into the right corner being played. And therefore, as he's unable to exploit those, I'm going to try and send the cue ball down the table out there and try and get himself lined up for the shot in towards the right corner out there. Maybe get himself a little bit of a setup in terms of a couple of those reds being played. And of course, if you take one of them out of the game, you're going to have a couple of more of those freed up there into the opposite part of the table. Play the shot really nicely there after yellow. Gets himself with a bit of the angle now on the red, but shouldn't be too much of it to actually make the pot difficult there for Maguire. As he rolls the red into the heart of the pocket out there. And I mean, taking that red out of the game actually means that he's going to have at least two more of those in towards the right corner. Of course, on top of the one that was playable there for him previously, pretty much along the cushion, but still having a bit of the distance there in between the right-hand rail and the red himself. Gets himself lined up on the red there in towards the right corner. So now 33 points is the advantage for Maguire. Has to try and play the red with a little power out there. Just draw the cue ball on the black out there and pretty much have two identical shots with two reds being played into the right corner. Just check to make sure he's going to know exactly where to place the cue ball to make sure he's going to achieve a perfect outcome there for himself. I mean, maybe just about has enough angle there to try and send the cue ball off into the reds out there. And I mean, at this stage, not going to say that it's going to be the worst possible outcome. As I say, preferably you want to put two reds first out there. They're actually in open play. But ultimately, as I say, you could use a couple of those reds as a chance there for you to line yourself up on a couple of them. And in the end, didn't play the shot too well because he caught the red, which I don't think he was actually trying to go for. In the end, he's going to have to go for a shot in towards the yellow pocket out there, which ain't going to be too easy. And therefore, he's just going to try and go for the red, potentially in towards the right middle. And yeah, it does seem to be stuck in a bit in between those two. Trying to exploit the chance in towards the yellow pocket. And this is what I say, like, if you're going to play that shot, you have to make sure you play perfectly. Otherwise, you're just going to sacrifice two reds out there to himself. Let's see what your shot selection is going to be. Is he playing a safety shot right now? Does seem to be that way. Trying to cannon the red in towards the cushion out there to make sure that he's going to have some form of safety to himself. Or maybe he's just going to be able to get through to the red in towards the left middle. And in the end, it was a safety shot, which, I mean, he's played quite nicely, to be fair to him. And right now, it is going to be 41 points of an advantage there. Hello, everyone. Hello, hello. Yeah, if you take this red in towards the sort of left-hand rail there and try and get the cue ball on towards the black ball cushion, you're going to be able to sort of dictate the run of play there on the next couple of shots out there for Higgins. But of course, preferably, you still want to have that momentum there for yourself and not allow too much momentum back to Maguire out there to be available as he plays the red in towards the right corner and play that with cushion, and in the end was never actually leaving the red on there for Maguire, but as of course was always going to leave a couple of different reds out there for him available in towards the right corner. It was just the short approach that he's taken on there, which has actually managed to form off a little cluster of reds there or thereabouts on the pink spot. With, of course, Higgins actually finding himself for the first time in the position that he's the one playing catch-up and has to try and make sure that he's going to put some of this pressure on Stephen Maguire out there. And Maguire can use this, of course, as a little bit of a chance there to go for the red in towards the right corner. Maybe try and exploit the little opening that comes his way. In the end, it's going to be 5 out of 5 missed long shots for Stephen Maguire. So not the stat that you realistically want to look back on. Is the same red going to be available there for Higgins to try and play along the cushion? I mean, it does seem that way. And he's going to be able to take this one. John Higgins, of course, has to make sure that he misses catching the cushion first out there and has to try and play the shot in a perfect manner there for him, which he has managed to do. So, once again out there, bit of contrast there to the second frame because it was Maguire having pretty much a similar sort of position there to try and have a clearance from. Of course, Maguire has was stopped there by himself with running himself out of position on a simple shot onto the pink out there. And in the end, it's actually cost him the frame there. So breaks of 32 in frame number 2 out there and break of 35 just in this encounter. So far, the best that we've seen of Stephen Maguire out there. As right now, he's just trying to see which is going to be the next red for him to actually play the cue ball on towards. And does seem to go for approach on the red in towards the left middle out there for himself. Maybe just looking to see if he's going to have another red available off into the right cushion out the corner out there. Because ultimately, I mean, if he plays his shot with backspin, which does seem to be the approach that he's taking, he can cannon the little cluster of 4 or 5 reds far away from each other. And yeah, ultimately didn't apply a lot of backspin, and I think he's just played the cannon on the cue ball, bit too much force there, and the angle that was actually sending the cue ball pretty much full ball there into the red, which was always going to minimize all the traction there on the cue ball. And therefore, right now he's having a look to see if he's going to be able to take the pink in towards the green pocket, which turns into a very difficult shot there for himself. So just like it was for Maguire, of course, in the previous frame, does look like Higgins is going to run himself out of position. And of course, both of these shots have actually been a transition attempt off into the pink out there. Let's see if he's going to be able to take this one on though. Plays the pink in towards the green pocket out there and tries to accelerate the cue ball off into the left-hand rail. I mean, he's played the shot and he's played it really nicely out there. The problem, which is going to be a bit of a, of course, obstacle there ahead of John Higgins, is going to be the fact that he has to bridge over a red. And also, I mean, the pink does return back on his spot out there, so you just have to answer whether he's actually going to be worth it for him to try and play that shot in towards the right corner, and is it actually going to be available there for him? So the problems don't quite stop right there for John Higgins, and still he has made quite a mess of the clearance opportunity that he had to himself, but so far, of course, was able to take the pink to get himself out of the main problem. Now has to try and make sure, gets himself in the prime position once again out there, with taking the red in towards the right corner, and still trying to get this cue ball away off into either blue or pink out there. I don't really think that he's going to be trying to play for the ball colours. Well, I mean, in the end, he's trying to force his way off into the ball colours or the blue, obviously, but in the end, landed exactly perfectly in between out there. So, not going to have any easy option once again out there. So, either pink in towards the right middle, which doesn't seem like it's a shot that is worth taking on, or blue in towards the same pocket out there, which is going to be probably even more difficult of a cut there. And yeah, Higgins takes it on nicely. Where's the cue ball going to finish though? He's going to finish in the way that we'll have Higgins lined up for the red in towards the left middle. And it's a perfect approach there, I would say, because even though Higgins doesn't seem to be too happy with himself, still think he'll absolutely take this one on out there. And as he's got the cue ball lined up for this red in towards the left middle, you know, plays the shot. And I mean, he does it with a way that he's certainly going to have himself lined up for the black. So all you have to do is try to miss the front jaw, get yourself with a bit of the angle on the black, and play the shot really nicely out there for Higgins once again. So now, not going to say we approach the easy part for him, because he still has got that red to deal with, which is quite close to the left-hand rail, which is going to be the main issue as it stands from John Higgins' point of view. And he's still looking for that massive clearance out there, which is going to get him a 3-0 of a gap there to Stephen Maguire. As he played the shot in towards the red out there, and I think that's ultimately going to be the one that finally, after all of those difficult shots there, going to run himself out of position. So, yeah, he clearly sees like he's 12 points behind. I mean, does he go for another sort of risky shot out there? But you just feel like it's going to be one too many for him to take on. Now I look to see if he's going to be able to cut this red in towards the middle, but not going to have a backup option. Even though if he plays for the black there, he's going to leave one of those 4 reds available for Maguire to try and play. And he's gone for it. Has he managed to make it? Yes, he has. But once again out there, he makes those brilliant shots out there, Higgins, but he still runs himself into the problem on the next shot out there with the positional play just not being there because of him having to concentrate so hard on the pot out there, which he can't afford to miss at this stage. 11 points now is in between Higgins and Maguire, still in the Mavericks' favour. As Higgins once again out there manages to recover brilliantly, rolls the black in towards the left corner, gets himself lined up for the red, off into the right corner of the table, and now having a disadvantage of 4 points there to himself, and having 3 reds to try and play for right here, right now, trying to exploit the opening, which of course Maguire presented to himself after missing the 5th shot in a row there of a long shot. Higgins, I mean, I don't think Higgins has made too many of those either, but it's not like he attempted 5 of them in the opening 2.5 frames. See if he's going to be able to roll this red in though with the rest and get himself with the perfect angle there, which he needs for the black. I mean, he's got some sort of it, but there's going to be enough there to try and get in behind the red, which I think is going to be the main focus there for Higgins, because realistically, if you take the red out of the game and get yourself lined up on the colour, you should be a straightforward 8 ball clearance out there for him, which I actually don't think he's even going to require there. So maybe the blue is actually going to be enough there for him to try and apply enough pressure on Maguire and actually get himself a nice little 3-0 cushion going into the last frame of the intermission. But, right now, just got himself lined up on the top red, which certainly indicates that the angle wasn't there for him to try and get in behind the red, which is currently positioned too close towards the left-hand cushion for it to be playable into either left or right middle. And being, of course, way too far from the left corner of the table. And he's just asking the referee to clean the white, and clearly realising that he's got very important 3 or 4 shots right now, because the next transition from the red is going to be important there for the colour. And, of course, the colour to the red transition is going to be the hardest and the most important shot there for him in the entire break. Plays the red in towards the left middle right now, and a lot of top spin required on the cue ball to try and get it into the ball cushion and out of it. Lined up on maybe either yellow or brown, you would think, and in the end, he hasn't really gone far away there with the cue ball. He should have been either closer there, but certainly have a bit more angle on the yellow, because it's going to be more of an attempt to try and cannon the cue ball in towards the red than try and play in behind it, you would think. And in the end, I mean, if he plays this shot with just about enough backspin, it's going to be really difficult to play the shot in the perfect manner there for him. I mean, it's a decent effort. It's a brilliant effort, you have to say, but it's still not going to leave him on with an easy shot there in towards the right middle. Seen those shots missed, of course. And I mean, the struggle doesn't end there for him, because the angle on the cue ball is actually going to send it towards the top part of the table and in towards the ball cushion. So either you have to try and take all the pace out of the cue ball and try and just drop the red in with no power at all, or you have to try and power that one home and accelerate the cue ball away from the ball cushion off in towards the sort of zone in between the ball colours and the blue itself. Now going to be very much the struggle there for Higgins, and you know, when you approach those final couple of shots there, it's always going to be an issue for you. But it's a break of 48 points, which does seem to be the most important break so far of John Higgins' campaign out there, of course, in this tournament. Of course, barring that decider with Liam Pullen and Scott Donaldson, he didn't have to go the distance there with the players, and certainly not going to have to do it right here at this stage, because it's looking more and more likely that it is going to be a 3-0 gap there for Stephen Maguire to try and overturn going into frame number 4. And of course, I mean, this turns into a massive challenge out there for Maverick, because, you know, barring those 4 shots, and, well, potentially even 3 shots out there, because the brown is going to get him over that sort of line of getting the cue ball into the green out there, and leave Maguire with leading snookers as he plays the yellow off into the distance out there, and plays the shot quite nicely. So once again gets himself lined up on the green, and once again out there, so scores 57 points and 15 points of advantage now. So Brown to try and roll in towards the yellow pocket, which he makes, and a nice little approach once again there from him. So gets himself lined up for the blue in towards the left middle. And ultimately, I mean, it's a perfect break there from Higgins' point of view, because 19 points is now the break for him. And now rolls the blue in nicely. Got to get himself lined up on the pink. And ultimately, it's the break of 66 points right now, of course, in terms of the points that he manages to score. And ultimately, as he rolls the pink in towards the left corner, and going to make this one stick as well. So brilliant stuff there from Higgins' point of view. And now not going to bother with the black. So the break of 71 points in the end is going to be the break that gets John Higgins a 3-0 cushion against Stephen Maguire. And it's certainly now a game off there for Maguire for the time being, because he needs this last frame of the opening mini-session to, well, I mean, stay in this match realistically. Even though we're only talking about the opening 4 frames, it still already feels like an absolute mountain there for Maguire to try and climb. He had a couple of chances there early in the doors there, against Higgins especially. You have to come back to that clearance attempt that was there for him in frame number 2. In the end, didn't manage to take it in the way that he should have. And right now he's going to trail by 3 frames to 0 out there. So it turns into an absolute massive frame there from, of course, both of these players, but especially from Stephen Maguire's point of view, because if he is to go into the intermission whilst trailing by 4 frames to 0, you have to feel like it's just going to be a bit of a matter of time there until Higgins manages to close off the match in a fashion that is going to get him a very much a substantial frame advantage there. I mean, he was favourite going into this match anyway with the odds, and right now those are going to be as low as 111 there for him to become the finalist, and 650, of course, for Maguire to try and do the same, overturn that 3 frame of a deficit. And so far you've got John Higgins with 250 plus breaks, you know, the breaks of 71 and 67 previously, and Maguire still having those 35 and 32 as the only point breaks of any significance out there that he managed to produce in those opening 3 frames. Of course, not really good enough there from the scoring point of view, but also his safety play has been way below average so far, and therefore just has to try and make sure that he's going to improve all of those stats out there for him going into the last frame, which of course it's been 60 plus minutes since we started the match, so just about over 20 minutes being taken on the frames, which still absolutely fine out there for the stage as high as semi-final. Now let's get the 4th frame on the way, and this time, of course, it is going to be John Higgins with a break off, and has to try and make sure he's going to be able to lift off exactly where he picked up out there and get himself a nice little 4-0 cushion as the ultimate goal going into the opening session out there. Maguire still has to try and make sure he composes himself. I mean, haven't seen too many of those reckless shots out there, but I wouldn't really say it's been an advantage there for Maguire, because even though we haven't seen those reckless shots, at least it's an effort and it's an attempt for him to try and put some pressure on Higgins. Don't think we've seen anything of him, apart from those, a couple of easy chances given away by Higgins himself, which you're always going to have in the semi-final stage, simply for the amount of frames that you have to play. And right now, just trying to accelerate the cue ball off into the left part of the table, and then try and get a little blunt of red sent in towards the right corner of the pocket. And in the end, that red is actually going to bounce off the pocket just about enough out there to make sure that Maguire hasn't left anything easy to John Higgins here to play. Right now, just having a look to see if he's going to be able to try and get the cue ball away into the top part of the table once again out there. So he gets himself lined up for the shot in towards the left middle out there. And maybe a little cross double with the red, trying to approach it and to send it down the table slightly. Play the shot quite nicely there, Higgins, and ultimately it's one more chance there for Maguire that he can try and take the red in towards the right corner. But ultimately, once again, every single time that you take shots like that in this position, and you're going to send the cue ball on towards the black, positional sense in towards the right corner, and he's going to be a red waiting there for you to make a mistake onto the lower part of the table. But this time around, it's a really nice safety being played for Maguire. And I think he's actually managed to get the cue ball in behind the yellow out there. So brilliant safety there being played from Stephen at that time. Certainly finding a perfect gap there for himself. I still think if Higgins managed to play the shot really nicely from the left-hand cushion there and bounce it off in towards the black cushion and into the left-hand side of the reds, which exactly is the approach that he's looking to implement right now. He's going to have very few of those chances left away there to Maguire. But ultimately, that comes with a big if he does manage to execute the shot perfectly. And I mean, he's tried to skid off a red and send the cue ball into the top part of the table, which, I mean, you're risking to an extent there to leave away a free ball to your opponent. But ultimately, not this time around. Of course, it is going to be unlucky to an extent there if he is to leave a free ball with still 15 reds on the table. And of course, you can see on the replay that was very, very close there to him actually catching the red. And therefore, it is going to be, of course, attempt number 2 coming up. 4-point score there from Maguire, which I'm pretty sure you wouldn't mind now at this stage, with him scoring only 35 and 32 points on the previous 3 occasions. Right now, has to try and hit this one the second time, of course. Not going to have a 3-miss rule applied to him, but still, it's always nicer when you do it the second time, just because it allows you to make sure you're not going to adjust the position of the cue ball too much. And Wizard versus the Maverick, certainly, as I said, it's the Wizard of the wish shot against the Maverick. But so far, as I say, it's the Maverick that has been on the struggling end of things. And once again out there, it's a bit of inaccuracy there from John Higgins' point of view. Even though, he caught the red pretty much in the perfect manner there for him with a minor contact. Let's see if Maguire is going to be able to get this red in towards the left corner. And he's tried to. Not going to be able to do it this time around, though. And the same red is going to be an absolute traitor there, and certainly not going to be on Maguire's Christmas card list. He's going to go over the right middle pocket out there for Higgins. Try and take the red. So, I wouldn't even count that as a long shot, but it has to be one of those shots that you still probably have to count on 0 out of 6. And, the pot success from Maguire's point of view has to be absolutely dreadful at this stage, especially for the semi-final stage. But ultimately, it always is the risk there when you're up against someone so good as John Higgins. Although, he's just missed the red, which I called as, I didn't actually call, but I thought was actually a very difficult red to miss from John Higgins' point of view. In the end, it's going to be one more long shot approach there from Maguire, you would think, offing towards the left corner, which has to accelerate the cue ball with a bit of power out there to make sure he's going to be around the black and aims at the left corner of the table. Of course, has to finally make this one stick, because, as I say, if he goes 4-0 down, you may as well not bother, because there's going to be the ultimate comeback that he has to try and produce. And yes, makes it this time around. So is he going to be on the black here? I said he has to go around the black, but in the end, he does seem to be content with the fact that he's actually gone for the either black or pink in towards the left corner or right middle. Right middle or right corner, I should say. And, I mean, in the end, he's looking really precisely at this shot, which, I mean, doesn't really fill me up with confidence. Maybe he's just looking to see which is going to be the perfect shot for him to play. But surely, if he's not confident on black or pink going in towards the right corner or right middle, should have never played the shot the way he did anyway. So I'm going to go for the pink anyway. So right now, it's all about getting himself for the red in towards the right corner. And he's playing the shot pretty well, to be fair. Not going to be set up perfectly on the red in towards the right corner, but ultimately still going to have another chance there on the board. And of course, the pink being respotted on his spot there just allows him to try and play maybe a similar short approach on the next time of asking. And maybe he's going to get himself lined up for the black this time around. He has got a little look, so clearly not playing for the pink. And trying to make sure that the black is going to be available there to him. So you know, looks certainly being on his side there out there. Of course, pink was very close to him, not being possible towards the right middle, which ultimately gave the chance to Maguire to play the long shot in actually focusing on the pot. Of course, making that one the first long shot that he actually managed to take in the entire semi-final campaign. Now rolls that black in towards the right corner, but ultimately going to catch the red on the way in. So, I mean, it was always going to be tricky there for him to try and play that shot with so little power because, you know, the table sometimes can just fade that black against you. And, of course, he was trying to play the cue ball for the same red out there, which not going to be available to John Higgins right now because he's going to have a black in the way. And ultimately, it's only 12 points scored once again there by Maguire. Of course, 8 points out of those were the points that he scored on the break, and the other 4 came off a foul shot made by Higgins previously. So right now, let's see what John is going to be able to produce himself. I mean, he has been looking at his plan there in towards the yellow pocket, and looks like he is going to miss that one by a bit of a margin. But in the end, ooh, the red just about drops in there, but the cue ball is going to be very close in towards the black ball cushion, which means that even though the black, you know, was sort of very close towards the right corner, he's going to be able to get past the red and get himself lined up on another break opportunity here. I mean, he's having a look at this shot as if to say whether I'm going to get the cue ball to try and be sent in towards the top part of it. So clearly is a sign that he feels like the black is spottable. He only needs a slight edge of it to just drop this one in. And ultimately just kind of have to focus on the next short approach there for him, and the positional play going to be absolutely essential there for him. And I think he's played the shot pretty well out there because he managed to just skid off the reds that were forming the main pack out there just underneath the pink spot. Gets himself lined up for a shot in towards the right corner. And ultimately right now it's another chance there for Higgins. And he's just having a look to see if he's going to have that red available there to play, which is going to be pretty much in a straight line. But ultimately at this stage you have to say he'll take anything that is going to be a chance to actually get him another break here at this position. But it does look like it's not going to be the case this time around. So even though I thought it was a really nice shot that he's played, it does look like very unfortunate outcome there for him. Of course, he's got 4 reds in towards the right corner, but all of them seem to be in the way of each other. And therefore has to play a safety shot, which, to be fair, he hasn't played too well. Could have had the cue ball bit further up the table out there, but ultimately, once again out there, back to the safety battle we go. And, yeah, trying to get this straight in towards the left corner out there for Maguire. So maybe he's going to be able to get the cue ball on towards the top part of the table in a way which is not going to leave anything at all there for Higgins. And you could actually see that the approach that he was taking on, maybe he was having a bit of attempt there to try and drop the red in towards the right corner, but ultimately didn't quite succeed on that occasion. Right now, Higgins can try and go for a safety shot of his own, unless he can't see enough of the red to try and drop it maybe in towards the right corner. Certainly does seem to be the approach, but in the end you could see that he was aiming for that red, only to play a safety out of it. And right now, another interesting shot there for Maguire, which is presented to him as a chance to take the red in towards the yellow pocket, but ultimately doesn't seem to even take too much notice out of it and just focus on getting the cue ball onto the top part of the table yet again, going around the red and trying to get the cue ball in behind the green. Quite nice shot there being played by Stephen. Puts a little bit of pressure once again there on Higgins. And of course the problem, and actually the weird thing about these matches, I would say that Maguire has been pretty much level there on the safety play with Higgins, if not better than him. But of course him not taking all of those chances with the long shots and just making way too many unforced errors actually have led the scoreline to be the way it actually is at the moment. And back to the lower part of the table it comes there from Higgins' point of view. Trying to send that cue ball in towards that zone and force Maguire to try and play this cue ball off into a couple of reds to try and send those in towards the sort of middle pocket if he wants to, or maybe just use that line for the cue ball, which is what he's tried out there. Once again, aiming that cue ball to landing behind the brown and blue. Ultimately, could have played a shot with a bit more power, would have put Higgins under more scrutiny. But still, regains that momentum in the safety battle. Having those sort of 12 reds in open play is not going to be beneficial to anyone, but the fact that Maguire has been on the front foot on the majority of the safety battle, of course, is going to get him a higher chance of actually getting the first chance. And I mean, whether he's going to take this opportunity or not is another question out there, but he has to try and make sure he's going to be there when it happens. Now, try and get the cue ball in towards the top part of the table, which does seem to be the little pattern right now. Higgins sending the cue ball on towards the ball cushion, and Maguire trying to do it with the black ball cushion himself. This time a little switch of the play, and Maguire trying to get the cue ball in towards a little bunch of blue and brown to his name. Play the shot nicer this time around, because although he's going to leave a one red there available to Higgins to try and play, Higgins has to play this one a bit full in the face there to make sure he's going to not going to catch the pink with this shot. Try and get the red in towards the right corner there for himself, and try and accelerate the cue ball off into the top part of the table. Maybe have himself lined up on a couple of those colours, should he of course make this red off into the right corner, and play the shot in a way which of course was trying to send the little plant that he had to himself, and played it in the way that he actually managed to drop in red very, very nicely indeed. So as you can see, he was clearly playing for the shot because he has taken the approach on it previously, and now clearly just going to send the cue ball in behind the blue or brown. And well, I mean, he's going to have Maguire in all sorts of trouble. So all that momentum that Maguire seemed to have on the previous occasion out there does seem like it's going to come to absolutely nothing there for him. And once again, just Higgins finding that beautiful shot out there to get himself out of any problems. And I mean, put all those problems on Maguire right now, having to play the cue ball of the two cushions in towards the reds from the right hand side of the table. Certainly is easier said than done, and does look like he's going to miss it from the first time around. And of course, I mean, the problem for Higgins is, even though he can get himself a couple of those points, and ultimately right now he finds himself ahead in the frame for the first time, it's going to be quite a struggle there for Maguire to make such a huge error to actually leave an easy chance away to Higgins, simply for the way of the reds being located so close to each other. And I mean, the majority of them just seem to be in the way of one another out there. Attempt number 2 though for Maguire, as he's looking to adjust there the line that he was taking, and it does seem to be closer this time around, but not quite close enough. And has to be mindful, of course, that he doesn't play in the way that he's going to have the black in the way of all of those reds, which of course is going to leave a free ball chance to Higgins, even though he's very unlikely to actually take the black in towards sort of right corner from the angle that I'm talking about. He still can have a different snooker lined up on Maguire if that is going to be the case. And for now, attempt number 3 coming up, and once again getting closer and closer, but this time around way too much of the adjustment. And I mean, I did say he's going to take an awful lot of a miss there for Maguire to leave a position away to Higgins. Well, that might just be the case right now. And it is a chance given away here to John. He's going to be able to take the red in towards the left middle, or the one into the yellow pocket is going to be quite an important factor right now. And he does seem to approach the red in towards the left middle as the prime chance there for him. And what a shot he's played. Lovely little transition there for the cue ball to be lined up on the black. And even though I did say all of those reds are going to be in the way of each other, I mean, the top one that he's taken is going to free up the majority of those in towards the right corner. And as he tries to exploit any more chances that are actually going to be presented there for himself. Already 13 points clear and trying to dominate the play against Stephen Maguire. Make that pursuit pretty much impossible going into the second mini session out there. And of course, the win in this frame is going to guarantee that he's going to go into the evening here in China, with the guaranteed for him not to be losing there. Of course, if Maguire is produced some sort of miracle and win 4 frames on the bounce himself, it's going to mean that it is going to be another draw out there, which, of course, provisionally was the prediction by my side, with it being such a sort of unexpected battle of the two. As I say, both of them have played some incredible snooker over this week, but also both of them have struggled on some of these occasions. You know, you could argue the biggest scare for Maguire was that sort of match against Jung John, ahead of this match versus Zach Zuoti, which he managed to take quite comfortably. Of course, he was playing against a Chinese player, which the crowd is always going to be supporting of. And he was trailing by 5 frames to 4. He was able to take the last 4 frames to 3, I should say. And he was able to take the last 3 frames to get himself with a perfect lineup. And a 6-4 win. Doesn't seem like it's going to be the blueprint there for him taken against John Higgins, because now it's John that is trying to run away with this one. 21 points is the advantage there for him. And plays the cue ball in towards that red, off into the right corner. Gets himself lined up for the black to try and take in towards the left corner out there. And maybe the cue ball is actually going to be sent in towards a couple of those reds in a couple of moments' time. But for now, of course, Higgins is going to take this shot, and the approach for this break as conservative as possible. Try and make sure he eliminates all the easier reds away. And of course, if he runs himself out of position, has to make sure he puts at least one of those reds on towards the cushion to give himself a bit more of a backup if he does need any of it, as he is chasing very much a 4-0 lead there to himself. And a dominant performance there in the first mini session, as I say, has been an absolute dreadful performance from Maguire's perspective. And the breaks of 12, 32 and 35 points have been the only ones that he's managed to produce in these 3.5 frames. And it does look like that snooker escape number 3 is going to be the last shot that he's going to play until we get to the intermission, which I think he certainly will be seeking for. Let's see if he's going to be enough of a changing point there for him in the match to actually turn that 4-0 gap there on his head, if that is to be the case. Of course, looking very likely with 37 points advantage for John Higgins as it stands. And having that red to try and play in towards the left corner for good measure. Get himself lined up for the black in towards the left corner of the table. He has now 38 points. Is the advantage there for Higgins. And tries to accelerate the cue ball away onto the top part of the table here. And try and ensure that he's going to be able to at least get in behind those couple of reds. Get himself lined up off into the left middle. Play the shot nicely, and 45 points now in between the two of them. 75 still on the table. So realistically, I mean, if he takes 2 of those reds with pink or black out there, he'll be able to get himself sort of 60 points ahead with 59 on the table. But certainly, 3 reds is going to be the pursuit there for Higgins, because I think he's going to be forced to try and play for the blue or the ball colours with the shot that he's taken on in towards the middle. Sending the cue ball into the top part of the table anyway. And once again gets himself lined up for the green. So clearly either having blue as not available there for a colour to play, or just thinking that he's going to get himself more of a chance there of getting a perfect positional play on this red. And played it nicely in the way that he's going to have himself set up for the red in towards the right corner. But he's pretty much left himself with a bit too little margin there at that time. And has to make sure that he's actually going to be able to see this red in towards the right corner. And I mean, the one that is actually closer in towards the right-hand cushion probably isn't playable, but the one that is second closest to it certainly is playable there from Higgins' point of view. Even though it is going to be a rare shot, you would expect him to make this one stick. Therefore, the next red after this one, of course, is going to be the one that gets John Higgins over the line for a 4-0 gap against Stephen Maguire in a dominant performance so far in the semi-final. Going very much one way as it stands. Goes 80%, and that percentage has been going uphill ever since the start of the session, which of course has seen John Higgins take the opening frame quite earlier on and takes the red nicely out there. So if there was a little bit of concern, there ain't going to be right now. So the black for him to go 57 points clear, and the next red will make it 58 there with only 51 points on the table. As the referee just tries to put the rest away, which of course needed all sorts of extensions out there for John Higgins, and right now he's ready to get back to business. Got a couple of options now as if which way he wants to have this frame ball lined up there for him. I mean, the red in towards the left corner or the one in towards the right middle are playable, but of course that way you have to accelerate the cue ball onto the top part of the table with a lot of backspin. But brilliant shot there once again by Higgins, and you have to say has been a brilliant display there from the champion so far, as he's now going 58 points clear with 51 on the table. And certainly it is going to be all to try and do there for Stephen Maguire, and he has to make sure that he does the main part of it in the first session out there, because if he leaves it too little too late, he won't be able to do anything against John Higgins there, with him trying to sort of force that 4 frame of a deficit in his favour. Right now it's another break of 50 plus there for Higgins, which makes it the third one of the first opening 4 frames. Right now gets himself lined up for the red in towards the left corner to try and play. Drops this one in as well. Of course, still can make a century break if he manages to canner the cue ball off in towards the 2 reds that he's got available there to himself. And in the end, he wants to go for the ping there, so sacrifices a sort of easy pot there taken in towards the left middle, but still makes the ping nicely. So still on the break now, and approaching his highest break scored in the entire match right now, with that being 71 points. Right now it is going to be 68 and counting. And ultimately, yeah, on the previous shot, he could have gone for the black, which was the easiest shot there for him, in towards the left corner. But ultimately decided that it was an easier approach there for him to try and take the pink out of the game. And just have himself lined up with a better angle on the red. Which right now, he just cannons the pink out of the way. So make sure he's going to remain on this break right here, right now. And gets himself lined up for the blue this time around. I'm not sure if it's actually going to be possible there past the yellow, or he's going to take the cheapest colours at this time of the frame. And it certainly does seem to take the blue on, and we'll have that one respotted. So apart from the pink, it is going to be a 6 colour clearance, which should be straightforward at this stage. And of course, for a century break, you're only going to need 5 of those 6. And the first one is taken with the yellow. And certainly is going to be now the highest break achieved by John Higgins, as it's 83 points and counting. Certainly will be a fitting end to the session if he is to land on a century break right when it matters. So, I mean, that is going to be an absolute... Well, it's a reality check for Maguire, of course it is, but didn't really think of, especially after his performance against Zach Tuerty, and a little bit of a struggle there for John Higgins against sort of Sean Murphy and Scott Donaldson. Well, not so much against Sean Murphy, to be fair. It was more of a Donaldson struggle, and losing those 4 frames on the bounce there. They're actually seen a bit of a struggle there from John Higgins. And right now, he rolls the pink in, so not going to bother about the black out there, but he certainly did bother about towing up for this match. And it's a break of 101 points, which is going to get John Higgins a nice little lead there, and a cushion of 4 frames to 0 as we head in towards the intermission after 90 minutes being played out there. And John Higgins certainly on the dominating part of the thing out there. Let's see if he's going to restore that sort of form when he comes back to the table, or is it going to be finally Maguire back in the show there and potentially getting himself back into the spotlight. See you in 15 minutes, and that's going to be 15-2, so 45 minutes past whatever time you're watching, when we get back into the action with both players making it back onto the arena. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we are back for the main action because the intermission is now over, and let's see if it's going to be all over there for Stephen Maguire, or he's going to be able to get himself back on form out there, which he does certainly need to do that right now. He's gone for a break-off shot, and that's not the way to do it, to be fair, because I think he's going to leave a red there for Higgins in towards the right middle. So, you know, it's starting off exactly where it finished there for Maguire. It was a disaster performance in the opening sort of start of the first session. And right now it's all down to the fact if John Higgins can actually get through to this red and see enough of it for him to actually be convinced by this shot and try and go for it in towards the middle. Now he's having a look to see if he's going to be able to get himself on the next colour after this one. So just try and apply a little bit of power on the cue ball, of course, but ultimately focus on the pot a touch more now with him having that 4-0 of a frame advantage. And he certainly does look like he is here to try and be all about business, because it's a brilliant pot once again out there. So, you know, Maguire's mistake and Higgins managing to punish him for that mistake so far has been exactly the story so far of the opening part of the session. Right now gets himself lined up perfectly on the top side of the blue. By the way, the cue ball had to travel pretty much 1.5 lengths of the table. Just makes the shot sort of appreciated a lot more when you take that into account. Now, 2 more reds available there to him after the first little red and colour combination. Ahead of the fact of him trying to probably get on the black this time around. As I say, I think the cannon off the blue is not going to be available there, with the pink being heavily in the way. And I think there is 1 more red there on top of the pink, which is going to absorb all the power and therefore just not make the red spread out in the way that, of course, will be on Higgins' mind out there. As he now goes for the black in towards the right corner. So plays the shot through it and tries to get the cue ball lined up for the red in towards the left corner. So, I mean, already having a little bit of the angle right now. So maybe just a little bit of the effort to try and nudge the cue ball in towards the main bunch of reds and try and get himself with a couple of those lined up for a shot in towards the left corner. Certainly have a look if that's going to be the case there for him. And will play the shot perfectly in terms of getting all of those reds to spread out. But in the end, either going to have a very difficult black there in towards the left middle, left corner I should say, or pretty much even more difficult of a blue in towards the left middle to try and take on. So left corner, left middle, once again they're available for Higgins, but neither of those shots are actually going to be straightforward. I think the black is easier if it actually goes past the red, which does seem to be the case out there, with Higgins attempting this colour to try and be potted in towards the left corner. And once again, flawless display. And what a nice little kiss there as well. I mean, this is turning into an absolute demolition job if it wasn't one already. Because, I mean, like right now, you probably have to say, with the first session to end, it is less likely for Maguire to win 2 frames than it is sort of for Higgins to have that 7-1 advantage to his name. Right now, just having a look to see which is going to be his next red to take on, which he does, to be fair, have quite a wide selection of to try and choose from. Probably the one in towards the left corner is going to be, well, like, certainly seems like the most obvious of a shot for him to take on. Now, just having an approach on trying to see if he's going to have the cue ball lined up for the red in towards the left corner out there, and try and accelerate it sort of in behind the black and try and get that one lined up in towards the left corner once again. And with the black not being available in towards the right part of the table to be played at this stage, I think it's understandable why Higgins wants to take that approach and accelerate the cue ball off into the right hand side of the table and try and get himself lined up for a nice little cushion shot, which of course is going to get him a gap of 23 points and counting. So 123 points now still on the table, with this red being on the table. Not going to be the case now though, because Higgins manages to play the shot brilliantly, gets himself lined up on the black in towards the left corner out there. So now has to just try and make sure he's going to be able to get past this red out there, just like he has on the previous occasion. Get himself lined up for the next red to try and take it in towards either right or left corner pocket. A little bit of a stun shot of the cue ball as well. Get that one lined up off into the right hand cushion and try and accelerate the white as far away as possible from the red to make sure that every single time, of course, the black gets respotted, it will take a little bit of time there for the referee to make sure that neither black or red are going to be in the way of each other. That's very much in Higgins' interest. But of course, right now, he's going to take the red out of the game, which has been sort of making the life of the referee and Higgins, of course, a bit touch more difficult there for him. Now, 31 points is the break and the gap there for Higgins' point of view. Still, by the way, I mean, Stephen Maguire only managed 3 sort of significant breaks there, if you can call them that, of 12, 32 and 35 points in the previous 4.5 frames. And as I say, as it stands, very much will consider himself quite lucky out there if he is to return to a table one more time in this frame of a 5. And, you know, if he wasn't sort of known already, it is going to be John Higgins all about business. And, of course, if he wins this frame, he's going to guarantee himself to have some sort of gap there to take into the second session. And the extent of that gap still remains to be seen. Whether it is going to be sort of a 5 frame to nil cushion, it could still be developed to an 8-0 frame of a cushion. Of course, he's unable to win this sort of match in the one session there for himself. But ultimately, I mean, if he gets himself 3 more frames after this one, he could certainly be match over before the second session realistically starts there for Maguire. Because, I mean, you can talk about climbing back a 3-0 deficit, maybe even 4-0 deficit, but I don't think you're going to do that if you're going to be 8-0 behind there of John Higgins. Gets himself lined up on the red, which is put over the yellow pocket previously. And right now, 45 points to try and accelerate himself off into the distance. Nice little line for the cue ball. Once again, to just about be on the top side of the blue to get himself another 50 plus points of a break. I think it's going to be his 4th one in the 5 frames that have been played so far, if you count this one. And just accelerate the cue ball once again onto the lower part of the table. Have a couple of more reds available to him, especially the one in towards the right corner, which, you know, you can sort of get flawlessly on without really requiring any sort of cue ball control out there. Try and get himself lined up for a shot in towards the black out there. Maybe just have himself under on for the black slightly on purpose, simply for the cue ball to be made around the red, and try and line it up for the shot in towards the right corner. But now has to focus on the red, and yeah, sends the cue ball a bit further away from the black out there towards the cushion. Not sure he's actually managed to get himself too much of the angle though. So he has to try and make sure he's going to be able to get the cue ball on towards the top part of those reds and get themselves lined up on towards that right corner pocket out there. Has to play this shot with a bit of force out there, and lines up for the red. Decent shot out there by Higgins, but once again just a bit too short on the pace, and now 58 points is the advantage there for him. has to try and send the cue ball off into the top part of the table to get himself lined up for a shot of either blue or the ball colours, of course. He has to play this one with a bit of power. And once again, just about he's going to be on the top side of the blue. With 59 points now, his advantage going into certainly the end game point of this frame out there. Well, when the intermission has finished, you thought that it was going to be a nice little chance for Maguire to restore his sort of frame winning breaks back into the arena, but it doesn't seem to be that way, as nice little kiss there from Higgins' point of view. It does go and put up a hand of apology there to Maguire, but I think he was always going to play for that shot to have a little bit of the contact on the reds, to get himself lined up on at least a couple of those in towards the left corner of the table, and play this red through the shot and get himself lined up for the black in towards the right corner. Now 65 points is the advantage, so of course with 67 points on the table, it is going to be black, which John Higgins needs now to get himself over the frame ball line and get himself lined up for a 5-0 of the cushion. That didn't seem possible with him going into the semi-final, but of course anything is possible now when John Higgins is playing the way that he has been, and there has been simply no answer from Stephen Maguire's point of view. Gets himself lined up for the red in towards the right corner. And nicely played yet again. So it's the black now to try and go in towards the left corner. So 73 points is now the difference between Higgins and Maguire. So maybe right now we're just looking at another century break coming for Higgins. Of course, he made one just before the intermission break. And let's see if he's going to make one straight after it ended. Now, still, after this one, he's going to have 51 more points on the table, but he's only going to need 2 more red plus colour combinations after this black is going to disappear there, hopefully, for him. Off into the right corner pocket of the table. Higgins so far hasn't been putting in the mesmerising stats of century breaks that Sean Murphy, sort of jousting Tom Gary Wilson, and RonnieOSullivan were putting in, alongside the likes of Watchalong and Neil Robertson, but also, you know, he's been there or thereabouts. As I say, it's 4th century that I've seen him produce in this tournament already, so no real sign that there's been only 4 of those, as I say, but certainly looking like the second one in the semi-final, and of course back-to-back centuries. There's very much loading there for him as he plays the black in towards the left corner once again out there, gets himself lined up for the red in towards the opposite side of the table, and play through the black now, try and get himself lined up for a century shot, of course, into the right corner pocket to go 104 points on the break, which is going to be the higher that he managed to produce in the previous one, still being the century break, but ultimately this one is going to taste a little bit better there for Higgins, because not only has he done it back-to-back times, but also it's going to be the one that could get him as close to 140 of a break as he possibly can. You know, if he plays the blue, he's going to be able to produce 137 points if he is to make a total clearance after the blue. I mean, it certainly is domination work from Higgins, but from this frame and the previous one, you just have to ask from Maguire's point of view. I mean, has he done anything wrong in the last couple of frames, or has it just been complete and utter domination work from John Higgins' point of view? Because I'm pretty sure he's managed to land the previous frame with a scoreline of 101-0, and pretty much has done the same thing here, although he has managed to take it into a little bit more of a break value. And now it is 4 colours away from making it a 137 of a total clearance there from John Higgins. Now rolls the brown in nicely towards the yellow pocket, gets himself lined up on the right side of the blue, and with a little bit of backspin shot on the cue ball. Nice little play through there on the ping, certainly not taking any of the time in between the shots, but he doesn't have to, as he gets himself lined up on the ping, and you have to feel like for one of the first times he actually is going to take the black here for a 137 clearance. Wonderful break that was for John Higgins' point of view, and he is now, he's not running away, he is flying away from Stephen Maguire, and it is now a 5-frame-to-0 advantage. John Higgins is absolutely on it, and right now it does have a little bit of vibes there of Wheezy against Barry Hawkins, or of course that flawless performance yesterday on the second session from Louisa when he managed to take a 5-2 commanding win there over Zhao. And after a 4-all first session, he was of course converted there from Louisa's point of view onto a 9-6 win. Well, for now, he certainly is going the same way there from John Higgins' point of view, as he's now 5-0 up on Stephen Maguire. And the Maverick has got it all to do there, and it is turning into a bit of a Tom Cruise Mission Impossible now from the Maverick. So he has to try and make sure because does anything in this opening session, because as I said, I mean, for now, the 7-1 or something of the scoreline is looking more likely than Maguire actually taking 2 frames out there than it is Higgins winning 3 of the remaining 4 frames, which of course he's managed to take 1 of them already with a nice little introduction to the second mini session. And of course the action will resume in 3.5 hours time, with us just getting over 2-hour mark since the match has actually started. And John Higgins certainly seems to pick up the pace very slightly out there as he tries to dominate Stephen Maguire by an absolute mile out there, as he tries to put all the pressure on his opponent. And of course right now, I mean, the odds that have actually been in Higgins' favour anyway, right now it is going to be over 23-1 there for Stephen Maguire to become victorious of this semi-final. And as I say, I don't really think the struggle is going to end out there for him, because I just don't really see the way that he's going to be able to take any of those frames away from John Higgins. And if he does it, of course, he has to try and do it right here, right now, because anything other than a 5-3 gap, of a deficit realistically from Maguire's point of view is going to be an absolute horrible bouncing there for him to try and climb. But even in that case, I mean, 5-3 going into the best of 17 match against John Higgins is going to be a struggle. But for that to be the case, he needs to win the 3 of the remaining 3 frames out there, which, as I say, at this stage, it does look like something that is not going to happen in the world of snooker, especially with the way that John Higgins has been performing ever since the start of the opening frame out there. So once again, Higgins goes for a break off on the right hand side and has to make sure that he takes it one step further than what Maguire managed to produce in the previous frame, where he left away a chance there to John Higgins quite earlier on in towards the right middle. Ultimately, it was the case that, cost John Higgins quite dearly out there, and he has to try and make sure that it's not going to repeat next time around, as Maguire clearly feels like his time is up there and he has to go for those chances. And any chance that is there for him for a long shot, he has to try and take on. He has to make it at this stage. He's gone for it, and he hasn't made it this time around though. So the same red is going to be available for Higgins to try and get it down the table, put the cue ball as close away on towards the ball cushion as he possibly can, and try and cannon that red in towards the pink. So he'll play the shot quite nicely, and Maguire's just having a look to see if he's going to be able to get onto the direct path there of catching any of those reds. Or does he have to play the cushion shot from the left or maybe even right hand side there, which does seem to go for the left hand side of the table first, which I think is a bit of a weird one for me, unless he wants to go from underneath the entire bunch, which was the case. And I mean, he played the shot quite nicely, to be fair, because even though he has left a couple of reds on, I don't think they're going to be taken there by John Higgins, simply for the reason of him having to breach over the entire bunch of reds to try and reach any of them off into the left corner, left middle. And he's just going to try and play the cue ball away from the main bunch, you would think. Unless he manages, I mean, if he finds a way to try and cut this red in towards the left corner, it's going to be an amazing shot there once again there from Higgins' point of view. And it certainly is going to be the case once again. And I mean, if you talk about ultimate performance, so far it has been just that from John Higgins' point of view. It is now once again another chance there for him to get a dominant break off 50 points plus there, which he has managed to do on 4 of the previous 5 frames occasions. Rolls the yellow in just about there, wobbled in the jaw slightly, which is going to compromise the angle on the cue ball, but ultimately he's still going to have a couple of options there to his name, because if you underrun for the top red, that would have been a struggle, but in the end he's actually overplayed for it, which actually gonna probably leave him with a nicer angle there to try and get the cue ball onto the blue. In towards the left middle. Right now, as he's having a look to see if he's going to have the blue available in towards the left middle. And just having a look to see if he's going to be able to try and get into the bunch right now. Once again, probably can take all the risk in the world now with him winning already a single frame since the intermission break was over. And right now, lovely little shot there. And he's going to be unlucky if he doesn't end up on any of those reds. And in the end, it does look the case like he's going to be on all the reds in the world. And what a shot he has been, once again, from Higgins' point of view. Play the cannon absolutely perfectly, sending the cue ball with all the traction in the world. Gets himself lined up for the black, in towards the right corner. And once again, as he has been throughout the majority of this match, making 2 centuries back-to-back out there. And right now, he's going to try and make sure it's going to be, well, maybe not the third one just yet, but it certainly is going to be 6 out of 6 frames won there for him. That's now 17 points. Going to be very much on the cards there for him as he plays the black in towards the right corner. 17 points of an advantage it is there for him. And once again, the cannon that he played into the reds, not only has he given him a couple of reds to choose from, it has pretty much gave him enough reds there to build a century break, you could argue on. And so far, he's 17 points scored and 17 points on the current break. Make that 18 as he plays the red in towards the left corner. Of course, has to try and make sure he gets and sort of clears the majority of the reds on the lower part of the table right now, just to make sure that the positional sense of the cue ball of trying to play the black into either left or right corner is going to be available there for him. And just tries to take this back in towards the left corner there for him. Plays the shot nicely. So now 25 points advantage it is for John Higgins. Rolls the red in towards the left corner out there. And once again, back for the black it comes. I don't actually think that he is going to be on a perfect sort of break for now. As you can see, he is sort of a bit gone alongside that because he had to use one of the ball colours previously. But ultimately, still a break of 33 points, which is going to be there for him. He manages to take the black in and not going to run out of reds anytime soon, you would seem. Once again, just roll through the cue ball and maybe try and force it into the bunch in a couple of shots' time. He's gone for it right now. And of course, could afford it. Had a couple of reds available there for him in towards the corner pocket. And I think he's played the shot perfectly there. Because, you know, he's made a minor contact to the reds. But ultimately, didn't really need it. Didn't really need that one to be sort of with all the brute force in the world. The minor gap will do him nicely because one red that is actually going to be available in towards the right corner is going to free up the other two to be played without any struggles there from Higgins' point of view. So 34 points now is the gap for Maguire. Of course, who's yet to score a single point since the intermission break. It was a wonderful 137 clearance from John Higgins previously. And right now it is 41 points and counting there. So for now it is 178 points without answer, which of course you add the century which was made before the intermission break. And you're probably going to be edging on towards a 300 points mark for Higgins. That he managed to score points without any answer there from Stephen Maguire's point of view. Higgins is on fire tonight. Well, he certainly is. And he just has to try and make sure that he makes the most out of it. I just think that, you know, you'll be disappointed probably from this stage if he doesn't go 7-1 down from Maguire's point of view. Simply because, you know, when you're 6-0 up, surely, like all the legends like Jimmy White, like Stephen Hendry, and RonnieOSullivan to an extent as well. I mean, they've been saying that. Whitewash in the business end of the tournament, I mean, they have been talking about the final stage, but still, if you do that in a semi-final, I mean, what a confidence boost that is going to be. And that's, of course, going to let the opposition player know, which is going to be Wu Yiza there for him in the final, that if John Higgins manages to play with the way he's sort of produced the snooker so far against Stephen Maguire, it's certainly going to be all about business. And it's going to be a massive struggle there for Wu Yiza to try and stop this winning machine. Because even though it was quite a positive performance there against Zhao Xington, it wasn't anywhere near as dominant as what we're seeing right now from John Higgins. That certainly is very close now to getting to that frame ball zone. Right now he's going to play the black to get himself lined up for one more red there, and the black after it, or of course any other of a choice of John Higgins, is going to be frame ball to ensure that the 6-0 gap is going to be a reality for Stephen Maguire. And the odds that have been 220 before the match has started are going to evaporate into 25-1 plus there for him. As this time around it is going to be the pink that Higgins tried to take in towards the left corner and play the shot nicely once again out there. Another beautiful break, another 70 plus break, 3 in a row there for Higgins, and Maguire has to remain in his chair where he was throughout the majority of this match here. 72 points now is the advantage for Higgins with only 67 on the table. So 2 snookers needed there for Maguire to come back to the table. But of course, fortunately for him, it's not going to be the case with Higgins still trying to accelerate off into the distance. And I think technically, if he's going to have those 3 reds with 3 blacks, he's not going to need that one, which is currently sitting on towards the cushion. And try and play this one with a screw back on the cue ball. Get himself lined up for the red in towards the left corner. So right now, we're only 2 frames away, of course, barring this one, from finishing the opening session. And I mean, it's only started 2 and a bit hours ago there. So certainly for now is on the cards of beating the record of Zhao against Wuyiza, which did seem like it was actually very quick there. But of course, he had both of the players contribute in the end with a score sheet with a similar effect out there, with it being a scoreline of 8 frames shared there in between the 2 of them and 4 frames each. 1 in between Wu and Zhao at that time. Of course, not going to be the case now, because the best case scenario now for Maguire is going to be him trailing by 6 frames to 2, which is still going to be far from ideal. And right now just hammers the black in towards the right corner. So the break of 96 points, and as I say, only 1 more red needed for 3 centuries, all consecutively there. And I mean, when you make back-to-back centuries, it's always a nice thing. When you make 3 centuries in a row there in a semi-final stage, it is nothing short of incredible there for him. So Higgins just has to try and make the cue ball on towards... I mean, it did need it to do an expensive colour there for himself, but I think he's going to have the brown in towards the right middle. So to repeat the break of the 4th frame of 101 points, if he's not going to be able to get himself on the red, not quite this time around, unfortunately, not going to be 3 centuries in a row, but it's still going to be 6 frames in a row there for John Higgins, as it's now Stephen Maguire very much in all sorts of trouble, as he has been pretty much since the opening start. But what a performance this is from John Higgins, one of the most dominant ones, certainly that we've seen this season. I mean, I don't really remember any of the players winning 6 frames on the bounce in such a late tournament stage. Of course, you can think about Wuyiza in the sort of last 16 and last 8 against Jock Trump and Barry Hawkins, but not quite against the sort of semi-final opponent there for him, which, of course, Higgins and Maguire both said yesterday that it was going to be a very close match between them. Doesn't seem to be the case that the snooker gods have had this one planned out. And yeah, as I say, just over 2 hours since the match has started. So very quick performance if you talk about 6 frames plus the intermission being played in 2 hours time. So pretty much you could argue that it's been a lot less than 20 minutes per frame. So something like 15 minutes averaging so far, which was the record yesterday of Zhao and Wuyiza. 2 more frames being played here in between the 2 players. With I mean, sometimes, of course, you have got 9 frames being played, and I don't think John Higgins will mind that, especially if he's going to have a 8-0 lead to try and carry in towards the last frame, which is, of course, he's going to need to get himself over the line and into the final. Maguire was very high of 6.50 there of him actually winning the tournament by the stage of semi-final. In the end, of course, that is going to skyrocket on towards the sort of 100-1, with the majority of those odds coming for him trying to actually overcome the 6-0 deficit. And right now, the odds are already 50-1 there for him to actually become victorious in the semi-final. So I think for him, it has to be just get a frame on the board, make the score sheet a bit more respective, and at least avoid a whitewash There's always going to be a start there for him. As the reds are ready, the colours are ready, the cue ball is about to be placed for Stephen Maguire to get himself started with his 7th frame. And of course, you know, only having to play a couple of shots in the previous frame. It doesn't show quite a lot of emotion there from Maguire, but you can see that it's certainly not been the semi-final that he would have expected from his point of view. And his opponent just managed to wipe the floor with him so far. And it is now the 7th frame to get underway. Stephen Maguire to break off, to make sure he's done it better than what he's managed to do in frame number 5. Send the cue ball in towards the right-hand side of the Reds, which of course both players have been doing so far. And play the shot quite nicely there, trying to get the cue ball in behind the Browns. And this time around, one of the better shots that we've seen from Stephen Maguire, certainly in terms of the break-offs. Gets himself lined up in a, well, decent safety play. But as I've said, even though Maguire does seem like he's actually winning the majority of those safety battles, you're either going to have him make a mistake of a long shot, or you're going to have Higgins with an absolute worldie of a long shot himself. Or he's going to just try and reclaim that initiative and try and get himself into another chance there. Maguire having a look at this red now, which you can say has left him in towards the right corner after canning the cue ball in towards the brown. So has to try and get the little screw back of the cue ball. Get himself lined up for the blue. That's going to be the case. Of course, has managed to take one of those 6 reds so far. And you have to say at some stage, it's just going to be no pressure for Maguire to perform at all. And as I said, around 300 points without answer. Finally, that streak comes to an end there for Maguire, because it's a lovely little long shot in towards the right corner. Gets himself on the right side of the blue to send it for the bulk line, which of course didn't have any reds at that time, so had to make the long way of the cue ball, but managed to play the shot in a perfect manner there for him. So maybe just a couple of more words there to say from Maguire's point of view, if he wants to get himself a respective scoreline of some sort. Of course, anything's going to be better than him trailing by 8 frames to 0 going into the second session. And of course, that's have a little bit of vibes of Jouslington beating RonnieOSullivan there in the semi-final of the World Championship with a session to spare. Well, the incredible final of Neil Robertson against Stuart Bingham last season, where it was an incredible 10-0 win there for Robbo. Gets himself lined up for the last available red in towards the left corner now, Maguire. And wants to send the cue ball in towards the top part of the blue to get himself a nice little angle to try and accelerate the white off into the pack of reds here. And try and get him some sort of red to try and hopefully land on. Has a little look to see if he's going to have any of those reds potentially going in towards the left corner pocket, which of course Higgins has managed to do in the previous frames, where he's managed to roll the black in towards the left corner and possibly the red at the same time, and play the shot beautifully there, Maguire. Now going to have himself a red available in towards the right corner. So realistically, probably the second biggest chance there that he's got to himself of claiming a frame at a single visit to the table. Of course, had a couple of those in the second frame, where he had a brilliant clearance chance. Didn't manage to produce any more than 32 points at that time. And ultimately, Higgins still managed to take that frame just like the other 6, which so far he managed to get himself on the board of. So now Maguire has to try and make sure he's going to take all the power out of the shot with the cue ball and plays it perfectly out there to himself. Gets himself lined up for the black in towards the left corner. And a little bit of topspin, and the black ball cushion being used for the cue ball to try and send it onto the right part of the reds and try and get himself with one more shot of a couple of them in towards the right corner of the table. Rolls the black in nicely, although, I mean, the red that I thought he was going to try and play for has just been cannoned in towards the main bunch of reds. Then good news for Maguire is, though, he's going to have one more into the opposite side of the table to be played. And transition once again on towards the blue, which overplayed slightly there, Stephen. May have to go for the green this time around then. And send the cue ball onto the lower part of the table. This is going to equal his highest, sort of the second highest break in the match of 32 points. And of course, we'll try and make sure that he's going to be able to absolutely destroy that record of his, or anti-record as you might call it, and try and get himself a first 50-plus break in the semi-final. Of course, for it to come in the 7th frame is nothing short of extraordinary. And I mean, he basically finds himself on exactly the opposite side of his performance against Zach Subity in the quarter-final stage, where Subity managed to win the opening frame and Maguire has gone on to win 6 on the bounce there. And if you take the opening 7 frames here, if Maguire is to become victorious of frame number 7, of course he's going to do exactly the reverse thing on what Zach Subity managed to produce against him in the quarter-final stage. Now gets himself a 40 points of a gap to John Higgins, so he's already managed to go above the highest break of the match there for him. Gets himself lined up for the black in towards the right corner once again there, so have a couple of reds to try and go for in towards either left or right corner. Plays the shot quite nicely and still gets himself lined up with a couple of short selections to try and go for, and just having a look to see whether the one closer to the right hand rail is going to be a more beneficial shot for him to try and attempt, and sending the cue ball with a topspin on towards the right hand cushion, trying to get that one lined up for the black to try and take it in towards the left corner. And now 42 points scored. It's going to be 49 when this black disappears. And of course, it's actually going to put him onto a first sort of real chance there of making a 50-plus break. You know, that clearance was there for him, but on the previous occasion, ultimately, he didn't manage to take that chance. And right now, it is going to be a disappointing end there for him. In terms of course, he's already guaranteed to lose the session by some margin. But as I say, I mean, if he does win this one and have one more chance to battle for the next frame, it's going to be a bit of a different picture there for him. But he's gone for a reckless shot there to an extent, and it does look like that he's going to have to pay the price here unless he can see the blue in towards the green pocket. I mean, he's going to have to go for a safety play. Hasn't got anything other than a yellow in towards its own pocket to be played. And yeah, it doesn't look good there for Maguire. Doesn't seem to be happy with the way he's played the previous shot. And he knows that was the perfect chance. And even though it is the highest break that he's managed to produce, it's still not going to be the one that is going to get him over the line here. And ultimately, I mean, if he can see enough of the blue, he has to take it on towards the green pocket. But he also has to make it stick. And he is going to make it stick, to be fair. So lovely little shot there from Maguire, which is going to get him out of jail out there. So once again, the blue is going to be respotted back on his spot out there. And a couple of more reds taken in towards the left part of the table, whether it's going to be left middle or left corner. We have to find out what the decision for Maguire is going to be. And it's going to be the red in towards the left corner, which he takes beautifully. Once again, top side of the blue it is. And of course, blue is going to take him over the line now with taking at least a frame against John Higgins. And well, certainly was possible there for him to win this session perfectly. But of course, it was always going to be a struggle when you're up against the opposition like Maguire, which, you know, you give a chance to, and you're always going to be in some sort of trouble. And finally, it's a chance that Maguire will be able to take to full extent there. Of course, would like to see a little century break of his own out there, which he's going to combine to the breaks of 97, 101 and 137 in the last 3 frames that we've seen from John Higgins' point of view, as he rolls another red in towards the left middle. So certainly does have all of those 3 reds available there to his name. Has the pink and brown out of position as the only 2 colours, but ultimately I don't think he's going to need them for a century break to be made. And ultimately I don't think it's going to be so important there for him as a total clearance pursuit. Now 80 points, and the red with the rest taken in towards the right corner, and a little bit of screw back needed for the blue. Played the shot nicely, almost cannon 2 reds with 1 shot there. But almost, yeah, he played the shot almost too nicely out there, because he's cannoned the cue ball into the red with pretty much full ball, but it's a bit strange there with him actually potting the red perfectly into the heart of the pocket. So obviously just misjudged the power. Managed to recover though, with a lovely little shot there. Despite being the wrong side of the blue, still guides the cue ball onto the left part of the table nicely. Maguire finally tries back, he does. And it's a nice little century if he makes it. It's only a couple of shots away, and ultimately, as I say, doesn't have to be too hard on himself. He's managed to make his best appearance sort of since Welsh Open last season. And it's a brilliant campaign here for him, of course, defeating Karen Wilson on the way in. Had a brilliant battle against the likes of Shu Si, Jiang Jian, and a nice little display against Neil Robertson. And sort of not Neil Robertson, Zach Doherty in the quarter-final stage. And ultimately, it is going to be a century break. So lovely little stuff there from Maguire. As if he is to make a total clearance, he will be 127 points of a break. But ultimately, I mean, with that 97 points of a sort of break from John Higgins on the previous frame, in the last 4 frames, we've seen 3 centuries of 101. Of course, 102 now, break for Maguire and counting. And the break of 137 from John Higgins' point of view. So 3 centuries and a break of 97 in the last 4 frames. Certainly does tell you about the quality that those 2 players possess to themselves. And ultimately, lovely little shot from the Brown to get the cue ball onto the lower part of the table. I mean, Maguire's certainly playing really well right now, but the problem is he needed to find this form a bit earlier against John Higgins. And ultimately, even though it was a brilliant performance there from the Wizard of Wishaw, you still have to look back on some of those chances which Maguire could have made more usage of. In the end, lovely little cannon on towards the pink, so the total clearance is still on there, and of course, from the position that he inherited from Higgins, it will be quite a clearance there for himself. Not going to be the case, and Maguire certainly sees the funny side of it, as he absolutely throws his hand in the air and celebrates it like he's just won the World Championship. He certainly sees the funny side of it, but I think inside of him, he still will be a bit disappointed with the way this match has gone against him. But it's always nice to get that frame on the board, and there's a big difference, of course, with him trailing by 7 frames to 0 or 6 frames to 1. The battle is not lost just yet, and for him to continue and keep fighting that form, he needs at least 1 more frame win until we going to have the first session wrapped up and move on to the second part of the semi-final, which is still going to be seeing John Higgins as a massive favourite out there. But as I say, if it is going to be a 6 frames to 2, the disadvantage all of a sudden probably becomes just about possible there for Maguire if he is to come back into this second session with pretty much resurrected like a phoenix from ashes out there. But right now it is going to be John Higgins to go for a bathroom break until we start what I would assume to be the last frame of the first session. Sometimes you are going to have the little selection of matches which are going to have 9 frames in a session. But ultimately it doesn't look like it's going to be this one. The referee will have those reds and colours racked up for the first time, you would feel. Certainly there is going to be an announcement to be made if it's going to be the final or just the 8th frame of this session. With John Higgins returning back to the table. And back into the arena. I mean, by the way, don't let this brilliant century from Maguire overshadow the performance. John Higgins has played absolutely brilliant stuff, and he's the reason, not Maguire himself. You know, Maguire is probably the reason that he's not 5-3 down, but John Higgins is certainly the reason that this semi-final has been played in the way that it has been so far. And Higgins is ready to try and take it away there once again. So just see what the referee is going to say. If it's going to be the final or just the 8th frame of the session. So just wait for the confirmation for the referee. I mean, John Higgins has been there for almost a half a minute now, ready to break off. And it is the last frame of the session. So the referee confirms that it is going to be 8 frames being played. So of course it would not have been possible for John Higgins to win the match in the second session anyway, in the first session anyway. But right now, can he build a gigantic gap there to Maguire and have himself a lead of 7 frames to 1? Or is it going to be some sort of lifeline to hold on there for Maguire? And a 6-2 deficit to try and overcome in the second session of the semi-final. Now has to pretty much try and do similar sort of thing that he's managed to do in the previous frame. Get himself some sort of safety battle going on and play the shot beautifully out there. And a little bit of a hand of apology. Clearly didn't mean to play it in the way that he has, but gets himself in behind the brown in a nice little way there for himself. And now Higgins has to be careful, of course, trying to send the cue ball down the table, because ideally you would like to have the cue ball to be sent on towards left-hand part of the table and try and cannon the reds from the left-hand side of them to make sure that the red has gone over the right corner pocket is not going to be visible there for Maguire. And with Brown covering the left-hand side of the table, Higgins has to make sure he does it from 2 cushions. And doesn't want to catch them from underneath, and he is going to do that. So it's another chance there for Maguire, and he has to make sure it's the last chance that he needs to get himself another frame on the board. Now has got 3 reds available there to him until he has to go into those bunch of reds. And of course, momentum can go against you and can also be for you. Maguire has to make sure that right now he himself produces sort of 200 or so points to nil against John Higgins to respond to the Wizard of Wishaw doing a similar sort of thing there to his compatriot in the last couple of frames. And Maguire there clearly trying to do it straight away in terms of trying to cannon the cue ball in towards the reds. And it actually didn't work out too badly for him. You know, he still gets himself on the red nicely in towards the right corner, and at least got 1 more red than what he's had previously. So right now, 4 reds taken with 4 blacks. Going to get you 32 points, which from Maguire's liking is probably not going to be the worst outcome as a guarantee. And then, of course, have yourself lined up on the black or the blue with some sort of angle to try and get the cue ball in towards the main pack of reds, which, I mean, to be fair to Maguire, he's managed to do absolutely flawlessly in the previous frame and just has to try and do similar sort of thing once again. Rolls the cue ball in towards the red and just has a selection shot now to go for, whether it is going to be the red in towards the right middle or the one in towards the left corner to go for. In the end, decides to go for the one into the middle. So the shot for the blue lined up. And I think the next one is going to be for the blue anyway, because Maguire does strike me as a player that would like to have the cue ball lined up for the blue, especially with the way he's managed to do it in the previous frame, and try and send the cue ball down the table for a nice little cannon in towards the reds, and hopefully for himself land at least a couple of them, as he will be looking for that nice little escape route for a 6-2 of a deficit, which of course incredibly would actually see him dominate the sort of ending part of the session, but still come away with that horrible scoreline to be facing against John Higgins. Now probably going to have to do it off the cushion unless he powers the cue ball in. And yeah, just the way that he's played the previous shot, I think he's done all the damage there to him. And 28 points it is going to be, so not the worst case scenario. And a safety shot to be played now off the main bunch of reds. It does look like it's just been a safety battle for a while. And so Maguire has to be careful that he doesn't spread those reds too wide out for his opponent. And played the safety shot perfectly there, to be fair to him. John Higgins has got the cue ball based up on the bowl cushion. And, well, if Maguire celebrating the previous frame win like he did, certainly seeing the funny side of it, I mean, he could actually take into the serious mode once again, should he be victorious in this encounter, because if you go 6-2 down, all of a sudden, if you win 1 or 2 frames to start the second session, you're going to be right back in this match, and that has to be the aim for him. As I say, 6-2 is going to be a nasty scoreline, but it's not the end of the session there for him, of course, which I think he would have been had he gone 7-1 down. And, of course, still very much on the cards there for him if he is to lose this frame to John Higgins. But it's another chance given away there to Maguire. And the red in towards the right corner to be played. Going to play this one with a little pace, but he's going to miss it in the end. So that was the chance there for him. Let's see if he's going to leave anything available to John Higgins at this selection shot. There's a red in towards the left middle that he can try and play. And I think he's got 1 more red to try and take in towards the green pocket there for himself. But wouldn't be too sure if one of them is actually going to be attempted there by Higgins. And is it actually going to be just maybe another double there, which it has been quite capable of playing so far in this encounter. Or maybe just a safer play and sending the cue ball on towards the top part of the table. Still think he's going to try and find an opening there to try and get the red in towards the left middle and have that one accelerated with the cue ball. He's played it, he's missed it though, and the opposite side of the corner is going to be available now for Maguire to try and take one more red. So Higgins just showing some sign of a struggle there late on in the match, but of course that is what happens if you spend the entire sort of frame off the table. Those misses are going to come for you eventually. And of course he's also only a human, he's not a machine, and has got an option of missing those reds available to him. But we just haven't seen too many of that, too many of those shots in the previous 6 or 7 frames. But it's a shot that has actually been played quite nicely there for Maguire. Gets himself on with another chance, which, as I say, with him having 29 and now 34 points of advantage as he takes the blue quite nicely in towards the right corner. There's going to be a perfect chance there for him to close off the 8th frame in his advantage and make sure that he's still going to be alive there going into the second session, although it being with a scoreline of 6 frames to 2. It's about 30 points away from doing that. Gets himself lined up on another blue now. Only 99 points on the table as it stands. And with the 6 reds being eliminated, and of course still 9 of those still being in play. By having a look to see if he's going to have any of those reds lined up in towards the right corner, or does he have to try and play in behind one of them to have those set up in towards the left side of the table. Or maybe he's got one more option there to be played along the cushion and send the cue ball into that red from the right hand side of the table. And play the shot quite nicely out there in terms of, yeah, the previous one was actually a nice way of getting on the blue with the right angle, but I don't think this one is going to be, because he's going to be disappointed there, having 12 breaks of such a promising position, 12 points of such a promising position, and I mean, realistically, the only chance of continuing the break that he's got is going to be a very risky cut in towards the right corner. But as I say, it's not the shot that you play at the semi-final stage of the International Championship here in Nanjing. And just send the cue ball onto the top part of the table yet again. Try and make sure that you're going to miss the yellow on the way in. And have one more safety battle there you have to win to get yourself the 3rd chance that maybe is going to be 3rd time lucky there for Maguire. As I say, it does remind you slightly of the 2nd frame, which I see Maguire have 2 chances out there. Had a similar points tally. I think he had around 37 points at that time. But Higgins managed to produce a wonderful clearance of 60 points or so to get himself another frame on the board. Right now, it's a safety battle which we're going to have to go through yet again as we approach the 3-hour mark since the match has started. Higgins with a lovely little safety shot to be played for it from his side. And he gets a cue ball lined up for the red. Try and take it in towards the right corner. And I mean, he's having a look to see if he's actually going to be able to go for an aggressive approach here, or he's going to have to try and just nudge that red on towards the right hand side of the table and make sure that he's not going to have any of them over the corner pocket. Play the shot nicely there in terms of getting the cue ball in behind the bulk line. But I think he's left the red on there for Higgins. And it's going to be a chance taken more times than not there from Higgins' point of view. So far in this encounter, he's going to have this red available in towards the left corner. The black and the pink are all going to be available there for him as well. And therefore, you could see another frame 2 repeated there from both Stephen Maguire and John Higgins' point of view. As he's looking to go for the cue ball to be sent in towards this red. And try and play with some power and conviction. Play the shot really nicely. And as long as he gets himself on the right side of the blue, which I don't think is going to be the case quite right now. So maybe just a little stone shot. Take the blue spot if you want it. And get himself lined up for the red in towards the right corner with a little bit of a stretching work to do. In the end, he's gone for a little bit of a screw back on the cue ball. So clearly wants it to be as straight as possible to find a way on towards the black, which he clearly feels like there is a path of getting on the most expensive of the colours. He now finds himself 34 points down with 91 points on the table. So still very much mission possible there from Higgins' point of view. Right now goes for the red in towards the right corner. And even though, as I say, he was playing for a little bit of a screw back, I did actually see the path for the blue and pink being a lot simpler there for him. Thought previously that he was trying to get himself purposefully for a shot for the black. But ultimately he's just gone for a more difficult of the shot of the 3 reds that he had available to him in towards the right corner. And now we're going to have the pink to try and take in towards the left-hand side of the table. A little bit of a screw back once again on the cue ball. And has that one placed quite nicely. So 13 points scored, 83 still on the table. And ultimately, not until we get to the last 2 reds or so that you can actually see any sort of trouble from John Higgins' point of view. He's managed to take probably the more difficult 2 or 3 reds so far. And just managed to ensure for himself that he's going to have 3 or 4 more reds in open play until he gets to the sort of 2 reds that could cause some sort of issues there for himself. Because he's going to need all of them to ensure that he's going to be the winner of this frame. And preferably, of course, has to make sure that he doesn't give away any of those chances to Maguire, with him having 20 points of advantage. Hi, Sasha. Hi, Kami. Plays the red in towards the right corner once again out there. So 22 points now is the deficit on the previous shot. Right now is going to be cut down to sort of 13, with the pink and red disappearing once again. So the red to try and be sent in towards the right corner. And I mean, this time around, I think he's going to have to go for the black just for the cue ball to have a transition onto the lower part of the table. And ideally, he wants to be as straight as possible on this shot in towards the left corner there for the red. Simply for it, giving him a little bit of a chance for a topspin to be played. And maybe even a little bit lower than the actual red. Let's see if he's going to have enough angle there as he manages to hammer the black home in towards the left corner. So 5 points behind. And played the red with a little bit of topspin, as I say previously. Have himself set up with a significant point of an angle on the black. Because that's going to be an advantage point once again there to Higgins. Just trying to send that red off in towards the right-hand middle pocket. So 4 points is the deficit now from Higgins' point of view. He'll be finding himself ahead in this frame for the first time if he is to take this black in towards the right corner. But ultimately, he wants to make sure that he's going to cannon the red into available zone there for him. I mean, he's done that to an extent, but he's going to have to take this red along the rail there with a lot of distance for the red to try and cover. And let's see if that shot is going to be taken here by Higgins. Because you feel like it's probably going to be one of those shots which we haven't actually seen in the semi-final stage from both Higgins and Maguire, that if you miss it, it's going to be a frame to your opponent. But also if you make it, you're probably going to be very unfortunate not to take the frame from here. And as I say, the thing from Higgins' point of view is when you have that 6-1 frame advantage to yourself, you can always afford to go for those risky shots that you wouldn't really go for if it was sort of 5-3 over a 4-all deficit. And in the end, he has missed the red. So it was possible there from Higgins' point of view. And now it is a golden opportunity once again there to Maguire to sort of have a minor redemption for the sort of, as I say, back to the clearance in the second frame, where was his golden opportunity once again at that time. Didn't manage to take it. And clearance from Higgins at that time was a 2-0 deficit there for Maguire to try and overcome. I think he'll certainly be very glad to come back to that stage. But right now, he's in the present time and he's having a black in towards the left corner to try and take. He's going to have the red in towards the right middle, which wasn't taken there by Higgins previously. But, of course, as I say, with the way the points advantage was there for Maguire previously, without him taking that red, which he attempted previously there, Higgins, and left it on for Maguire, it would not have made a massive difference. And Maguire rolls the red in nicely, and right now has to ensure that it's not landed straight on the pink, because probably going to have to take the blue in towards the left middle pocket with the cue ball being sent quite far up the table. So it is going to be ping taken in towards the left middle and try and get the cue ball as close onto the red as you possibly can. I mean, ideally would have liked to avoid the rest shot, but ultimately it's still going to be better than running himself out of position. So cue ball to be sent in towards the red, and 12 points of a deficit in favour, of course, of Stephen Maguire right now. So pretty much you feel like a red in a nice position on the blue is going to be all the ingredients that Maguire needs for him to actually be 6-2 down. And of course, with him being 6-0 down, it's probably not going to be the worst outcome there for him of the opening session. And even though he's landed on the wrong side of the blue, he still played the shot brilliantly there. So now yellow to go 20 points clear. And the green ball is going to be frame ball there, and probably the last colour that he will officially need to get himself that second frame on the ball. Of course, winning back-to-back frames there against John Higgins is still a good thing for you, but a bit of a worse thing is the fact that he's lost out on 6 of those previous occasions, and it's still going to be a perfect session there from Higgins' point of view, because the 6-2 of a gap against the opposition like Maguire, that is one of the most unpredictable players on the tour, is going to be a great result there for him. In the end, probably slightly disappointed that he hasn't realistically won the match just yet, with him having a 6-0 advantage. At that stage, he was looking like he was going to be sort of 7-1 or 8-0 there, potentially available for Higgins to take. But as I say, against Maguire, it is going to be a great little session there for him, and warm handshake in between the two players. Higgins is certainly still having one foot in the final, but Maguire just about survives there. And a little bit of an overview, which can be done on the sort of first session, but I think it's going to have to be quite quick on this occasion, for the simple reason of the opening 4 frames have been all in very similar fashion there, won by Higgins, apart from maybe the 4th one and the 2nd one, which I'll mention out to you. The first one was a domination there from Higgins, and he had a couple of chances, but realistically, Maguire never had an ideal break-building chance, which would have seen him score a lot of points. The second one was a contrast, though, because that's when he scored his first points of the semi-final. And even though Higgins had a sort of 50 points advantage there to him at that stage, Maguire still could have had a nice little clearance to set himself up with a 1-all draw going into frame number 3, which, of course, would have been the frame that he didn't manage to win until very much the 7th time of asking, but messed up a position on the collar, lost himself a position, even though he played a safety shot. It was a safety battle which Higgins managed to win at that time once again, and ultimately it's cost Maguire quite dearly. And as I say, apart from maybe the 4th round, where once again it was absolutely no chance there for Maguire after an early couple of mishit safeties. Higgins was playing some of the brilliant stuff, taking the doubles in, of course, 2nd and 3rd frames there to his name, and making a century of 101 points to make it a wrap there in the first session. Managed to do pretty much similar sort of thing there in the start to the 2nd mini session. Get himself a 5-0 gap with a break of 137 total clearance. And of course has gone 6-0 up with another break of 97 points there to his name. Maguire managed to do minimal sort of damage limitation there to himself, getting a century of 114 points, and the breaks of 21 and 40 in frames number 7 and 8 out there. Ultimately, he's still got a massive mountain ahead of him to climb, but ultimately, as I say, he's still in this match, even though just about. And it all comes down to the first couple of frames of the 2nd session, because if Maguire loses any one of them, 7-3, 7-2 of a gap, probably not going to be able to recover from that. But anyway, that's in a couple of hours' time. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you around for the 2nd session out there. Feel free to tune in for that one. And of course, don't miss out the final. Wu Yiza against John Higgins against Stephen Maguire Day tomorrow for the title at the International Championship, as we crown the new winner once again of this season on the WST calendar. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you around soon.